How dare a mere temp worker act so arrogantly? You're fired. A voice as cold as ice echoed through the meeting room. Stephen, the next president of the company, stood triumphantly in front of my desk, a smug grin plastered across his face. Dressed in a luxurious suit, he towered over me like a predator looking down on its prey. The sound of employees holding their breath filled the room. No one dared to meet his gaze, so their eyes stayed glued to their desks, or their hands froze mid-typing on their keyboards. You don't need to come in tomorrow. The contract is terminated. This is your final notice. But without Michael, the core system overhaul is. Sarah stood up, desperately trying to push back. Her voice trembled with emotion. Shut up! Stephen's angry roar shook the room. What can a temp worker possibly do? As long as I'm here, everything will be fine. Or Sarah, do you want to get fired along with him? At that moment, all the color drained from Sarah's face. Her sorrowful eyes turned to me. I didn't have the right to ruin her life too. I understand. I stood up quietly. The monitor on my desk still displayed the unfinished system design. Years of hard work were about to vanish in this very moment. Stephen, with a triumphant expression, delivered his final blow. You're nothing but a disposable pawn. Wherever you go, no one will need someone like you, a failure. What can you do? The days I had worked so hard to climb up at Symphonia Systems. It was all about to end in this moment. However, this firing incident would ultimately lead to Stephen's downfall. After all, my true identity was, my name is Michael. I have a brother, Thomas, who is 3 years younger than me. Our father worked at construction sites, and our mother worked night shifts as a nurse. Despite their hard work, our family's finances were always precarious, and we lived cramped together in a rundown apartment in an old housing complex. Unlike my classmates, I never had the chance to attend extracurricular lessons, let alone own a game console. All I could do was watch enviously as my friends played. Yet, amidst our struggles, my family still had a beacon of hope. Thomas is truly exceptional. His future looks so bright. I'll never forget the day Thomas's homeroom teacher, Mr. Miller, said those words during a home visit. My mother beamed with pride. Thomas excelled academically, so his report card was always lined with straight A's. At school, his brilliance was so well known that even the teachers admired him. Rumors spread that he might secure a recommendation to that prestigious high school affiliated with a famous university. In contrast to Thomas, I wasn't a failure, but I certainly wasn't exceptional. As my lackluster achievements piled up, my parents' attention gradually shifted entirely toward Thomas. Look at this. Mr. Miller said Thomas could become a doctor. My mother said this proudly, showing me my brother's report card. Unable to bear it, I fled to the shared room I had with Thomas. I pulled out my own crumpled report card from the bottom of my bag and tossed it into the corner trash can. Thanks for dinner. One evening, as I was about to leave the dinner table, my mother stopped me. We've decided to send Thomas to a private tutoring school. So, I'm sorry, Michael, but your allowance will be reduced starting next month. You're the older brother, so you can endure it, right? What? I froze at her sudden declaration. Caught off guard by my reaction, my mother simply said, for your dear little brother, right? Don't make such a face. Leaving me with no choice but to silently nod. But, Michael. As I lay in bed at night, unable to sleep and lost in thought, Thomas spoke to me. I'm sorry about the tutoring school fees. Don't worry about it. In the darkness, I kept staring at the ceiling. Even though I understood, I couldn't bring myself to be kind to my brother. I felt pathetic and unable to be honest. From that time on, everything in our household revolved around Thomas. To let him focus on his studies, I was kicked out of our shared room and made to sleep in the storage room. My parents no longer paid any attention to me, and the frequency of their words to me dwindled. Every day felt dull, and I began to distance myself from family gatherings, seeking a place to belong elsewhere. You've got some sharp eyes. Why don't you join my crew? One night, as I sat alone on a park bench, a group of rough-looking guys approached me out of nowhere. I smirked in response. Seeking an escape, I found myself hanging out with them more and more. Michael, what on earth are you wearing? My mother's voice rang out, and I clicked my tongue, glaring at her. Shut up. What did you just say? From that day, I started leaving the house before she woke up. At that time, my father was busy moving between construction sites due to the rush from a major upcoming event and rarely came home. Michael. One night, as I came home late, I locked eyes with Thomas. His hesitant gaze made me look away as if trying to escape. I started skipping school more frequently, and when the teachers reluctantly urged me to attend classes, I would sit at the back of the classroom and do nothing but nap. Not only did teachers and classmates look at me with cold, indifferent eyes, but I often overheard whispers like, "With such a brilliant younger brother." And I hunched my shoulders, trying to endure it and let it pass. The sound of kicking a vending machine echoed through the quiet residential street at midnight, followed by the clatter of cans rolling away. For some reason, it gave me a sense of release. Hey, Michael. You do it too. Egged on by my friends, I kicked the machine as hard as I could, trying to vent my frustration. A sensation spread through my body, like something inside me breaking, making everything feel meaningless. Hey! What do you think you're doing? Every time we sped through the streets on bikes, the police would catch us, and my mother would show up in tears to take me home. Why are you doing this? Shut up. For the first time in a long while, I saw the clarity in her eyes, and I couldn't bring myself to look her in the face. I turned away instinctively. This reckless lifestyle continued for about 6 months. One night, as we loitered in an alley as usual, one of my friends began grinning while looking in a certain direction. Hey, look over there. He gestured with his chin toward a businessperson, who seemed to have missed the last train, stumbling as he walked. Jackpot. Wait, you're not serious. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was on a completely different level from the pranks we had pulled before. Michael, you're on lookout. Just as my mind began to spiral into panic, unable to think of how to respond, it happened. Michael. I turned toward the voice, and there, on the other side of the street, was Thomas, staring at me with a puzzled expression. He began stepping onto the road. It happened in an instant. From far away, the headlights of a large truck pierced through the darkness, bearing down on us at high speed. Thomas. Without thinking, I dashed toward him. But he was faster. Michael, watch out. Thomas shoved me aside with all his strength. At that moment, the massive truck's headlights illuminated Thomas's body. The sound of something being crushed, mixed with screams, echoed everywhere, throwing the scene into chaos. Thomas. I called his name over and over again. Thomas was fortunate enough to survive, but the severe spinal injury left him completely paralyzed from the waist down. On top of that, the complicated fractures in both arms meant his right hand had limited mobility. It was all my fault. I had stolen Thomas's dream of becoming a doctor, the hope of our family, everything. If only I hadn't been there that night. No, if only I hadn't started hanging out with those delinquents in the first place, none of this would have happened. From that moment, I thought there would never be another dawn in my life. Michael. I stared blankly at the IV drip, unable to focus. Thomas looked at me with a worried expression. His body was wrapped in countless bandages, and his face was still swollen and bruised. I've done something that can't be fixed with an apology. Mom and Dad were right, it's my fault. It's because I became a delinquent that I ruined your life. I couldn't bring myself to look directly at Thomas's face and instead buried mine in the edge of his bed. I would never forget the expressions on my parents' faces when they saw Thomas in his battered state. They didn't say a single word of blame to me. Instead, they sat on the bench in the waiting room, lifeless, like empty shells. They had listened calmly to Dr. Moore's explanation and completed all the necessary procedures without issue. But their inner turmoil must have been unimaginable. I realized then that I hadn't just stolen Thomas's future, but I had taken away my parents' hope as well. Michael, I need you to listen to me. Above me, I heard Thomas's calm voice. There's something I've been meaning to say for a long time. What is it? I lifted my head, and Thomas, avoiding my gaze, spoke softly. I was struggling. What? Every time I was called a genius, I felt like the pressure was suffocating me. My parents, my teachers, everyone had such high expectations for me. It became unbearable. I couldn't help but catch my breath. I hated it. If I scored first in a test, they'd tell me to aim even higher next time. Even the idea of going to medical school wasn't my own dream. I had no idea. I was completely unaware of the silent struggles Thomas had been carrying. But you, Michael, you were different. Thomas said this while giving me a soft, heartfelt smile. You were the only one who saw me as your little brother, not just some high-achieving student. No matter how good my grades were or how much praise I got from others, it didn't matter to you. Do you remember? Thomas's gaze grew distant, as if he was reminiscing about an old memory. I came home once with a perfect score on a language test. But honestly, I didn't feel happy about it. Our parents didn't notice how I felt. So they just kept praising me endlessly, like always. But you were different. That moment came flooding back to me vividly. Hey, Thomas. Hurry up and finish your homework, so that we can play baseball in the park, you said. After helping me with my homework, you brought out that beat-up glove of yours and laughed, saying, I'll make sure you hit a home run today, like it was the most natural thing in the world. As he spoke, the expression on his face turned into that of the carefree little brother I used to know. Everyone else called me a genius, but you always just called me Thomas. You never brought up studying. And you just treated me like your little brother. After we'd run around and covered in sweat, you'd always say, You're probably tired, right? I'll treat you to some ice cream, even though I knew your allowance was tight. Yet, you always bought it for me. The memory of my little brother's childish, joyful smile was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. Those simple, casual words of yours meant more to me than any praise or encouragement I received. While everyone else forced me to wear the mask of a genius, you let me just be myself. You have no idea how much that saved me. Tears began to stream down Thomas's face, large and uncontrollable. I was scared of being hated by you, Michael. But before I knew it, the distance between us had grown, and I didn't know how to close it. Those words pierced my heart. It was true that I had become a delinquent and thrown away the time I should have spent with my precious brother. But Thomas had always thought of me, his older brother, all along. So now, I feel relieved. Finally, I've been freed from our parents' expectations. I don't have to become a doctor anymore. You idiot. My voice trembled. And now, I feel like I can just be your brother. Thinking about that, I'm actually... Before he could finish, I broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have been proud to have a brother like you, but instead, I let my inferiority complex blind me. We could have spent time together as siblings, like we used to. But I let my stupid pride get in the way and distanced myself from you. I didn't even notice your cries for help. I'm the worst kind of brother, and I'm so sorry. Michael. Thomas struggled to speak, his voice filled with determination. Just having you back as my brother is enough for me. I'm truly happy. In that moment, I made a decision. To protect Thomas's future, I would become a better person. No matter what happens, from now on, I will protect you. With my hands, I'll do what yours can't. I promise, I'll protect you. Michael. The setting sun streaming into the room painted Thomas's face a deep red. I held his right hand tightly, as if I'd never let go. In the following days, a question consumed my thoughts. What am I good at? What can I do for Thomas? As I pondered these questions, I absent-mindedly picked up a book Thomas had been engrossed in reading. Titled Programming for Beginners, the book seemed overwhelmingly complex at first glance, making my head spin. Yet there was something about it that deeply drew me in. Michael, are you interested in programming? Interested? Not really, I was just looking at what you were reading. I tried to brush it off, but the truth was, my curiosity about the unknown world of programming was growing steadily. Drawn by that curiosity, I found myself diving headfirst into studying programming. Michael, are you seriously aiming to be a programmer? One day in the break room, a coworker asked me with a puzzled expression as I read a technical book. Wow, who knew you were so ambitious? That's impressive. Ignoring the remark, I silently turned the page. I juggled multiple part-time jobs, took care of Thomas, and continued studying whenever I had a free moment. With no money to spare, I used the public computers at the local community center for as long as the time limits allowed, typing out the code I had just learned. Each time an error message popped up, I was filled with a mix of frustration and guilt. Frustration from wondering why I was doing this alone, and guilt from feeling I couldn't face Thomas unless I mastered this skill. During breaks, I practiced writing sample code on my phone, slowly building experience. Despite the teasing and cold stares from my coworkers, I refused to give up. Michael, you're amazing. As proof of my progress, I created a simple typing software from scratch, following a guide at the end of a textbook. Thomas was speechless with amazement when he saw it. Seeing his reaction secretly thrilled me, but I tried to hide it by shaking my head. It's nothing. You're the amazing one, Thomas, understanding all this difficult stuff so easily. No way. It's just because I happen to be good at English. I could sense his consideration for me in those words. Still, it's not just about typing out template code, you know. He added, pausing briefly while moving the cursor with his left hand and staring at the code on the screen. Michael, this isn't just me being kind because we're siblings. Getting this far through self-study? That's talent. His words made my eyes well up. I'd never been acknowledged like this before. But Thomas, he truly saw me for who I was. I took a deep breath and turned back to the screen. After earning several IT-related certifications and programming qualifications, I eventually joined the major IT company Symphonia Systems as a contract employee. Michael, could you handle the system development? Sarah's clear voice echoed through the office. Yes, I've got it covered. I clattered away on the keyboard as I responded. Sarah, known as the ace of the sales department, had a reputation for her beauty, with her long black hair and intelligent demeanor earning admiration throughout the office. She was 2 years older than me and highly knowledgeable about IT, handling technical discussions with ease. Still, isn't it reckless to take on such a large-scale system all on your own? Designing and coding it all by yourself is just too much, isn't it? A look of concern spread across Sarah's face. I'll have it completed by the deadline. Don't worry. I said this without taking my eyes off the monitor. There was no falsehood in my words. This scale of work could be completed within a week. Since joining the company, my finances had improved, allowing me to take paid programming courses on weekends and attend networking events where I had others review my code. Thanks to those efforts, my skills had significantly broadened since I first joined. Now, I could even handle complex requests from other employees. Michael, do you have a moment? The development lead, Timothy, approached my desk. I wanted to hear your thoughts on this design document. He handed over the design plans for the core system overhaul of a major client. You want my opinion? Of course. There aren't many engineers in this company who understand customer needs as well as you do. Timothy continued enthusiastically. And that emergency response the other day? It was flawless. Honestly, you saved us all. He placed a hand on his chest, visibly relieved. Having you here is a real blessing for us, Michael. Thank you. His words warmed something deep inside my chest. Still, someone as talented as you being a temp worker. Should I talk to management about making you a permanent employee? No, I think being a temp suits me better. I see. Timothy walked away with a puzzled expression while I kept typing away at my code. One day, hey, temp. As I was looking at the monitor, a sharp male voice suddenly rang out. Since I was the only temp employee, I instinctively turned around to see a good-looking man, not much older than me, staring down at me with a condescending gaze. Stephen. It was Stephen, the son of Mr. Sullivan, the president of Symphonia Systems and the company's next president. In recent years, due to Mr. Sullivan's illness and need for recovery, Stephen has been entrusted with the company's day-to-day management. A graduate of a prestigious university where he majored in business administration, Stephen also independently acquired system-related certifications, earning him the reputation of a promising successor. However, to me, his sharp, scheming eyes and the unervingly perfect black suit he always wore exuded an air of menace. Despite his refined appearance, there was something unsettling about him that made my instincts wary. Most of all, his perpetually condescending attitude and behavior toward those around him reminded me of the bad types I had encountered in the past. What's the progress on the recent project? It's on schedule. I plan to deliver it the day after tomorrow. Oomph. Pretty confident for a temp, aren't you? Stephen's tone was laced with contempt. In work, there's no distinction between temp or permanent employees. I responded as calmly as I could, but it seemed to irritate him. He shot me a fierce glare and suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone! Gather around," summoning the employees with a piercing voice. The employees' faces collectively darkened, yet they reluctantly began gathering in the center of the office. Here we go again. I wonder who's getting roasted this time. Hearing the murmurs from the younger staff, a sense of dread crept over me. I could do nothing but stand frozen in place, bracing for the worst. Stephen suddenly slammed his hand against the board displaying each department's progress and barked, "This quarter's performance is unsatisfactory." Do you know why, marking the start of his public scolding session? Especially the sales department. Why are the numbers for new client acquisitions so low? Sarah. Explain yourself. Suddenly called out, Sarah quietly stepped forward. Yes, we've been proactively making visits, but initially, we focus on building trust with clients to establish a reliable relationship. Is that an excuse? Stephen's angry voice cut her off mid-sentence. Results are everything. Do whatever it takes to secure those deals. Stephen ruthlessly dismissed the earnest efforts Sarah had put into her work. The systems development department is no different. There are 3 projects with delayed deadlines. What's going on? I could see the faces of the employees in the targeted department twisting with discomfort. Stephen. One of the younger employees hesitantly stepped forward. The delays are due to specification changes requested by the clients, and the additional workload is. Shut up. Stephen's fist slammed into the board once again. All you do is make excuses. Listen up. Show some grit. Work overtime and come in on weekends. If you put in the hours, it'll get done. And another thing. Stephen's gaze turned toward me. There's a temp worker here acting all high and mighty, pretending to be on the same level as the full-time employees. I don't like it. With a cruel smirk, he said something completely unexpected. From today, you're the office errand boy. You won't be doing any system work, obviously. What? But there's embedded work that only Michael can handle. Though my colleagues, looking bewildered, tried to object, Stephen snapped, "Shut up, losers. Someone free can handle it. Besides, I can manage a system or two myself," he added smugly, pointing at himself. "For now, go wipe down all the chairs in the conference room. Make sure to clean every corner thoroughly. Yes. If you try to slack off, I'll terminate your contract immediately." "Understood." As I bowed deeply, Stephen flashed a cruel smile. "Temps like you should stick to this kind of work. Trying to act like a full-time employee? You're 100 years too early for that." With that, Stephen turned on his heel and left. As I continued to wipe down the chairs, I noticed Sarah standing near the conference room door. "Michael." "Sarah, what's wrong?" She walked over and handed me something. "Here, please eat this." I looked down to see a warm rice ball in my hand. "Oh, thank you. I'll help you." As Sarah picked up a cloth, I opened my mouth to stop her. At that moment, "Hey! What's going on here?" Stephen burst into the conference room. "A temp trying to cozy up to an employee? Pathetic. Michael is a talented engineer." Sarah stood up for me without hesitation. "Shut up. Sarah. Come with me." As he forcefully reached out to grab her arm, I casually stepped between Stephen and Sarah, as if by coincidence, and said nonchalantly, "Oh. Excuse me." With movements so natural it seemed like I was merely passing through the hallway, I intercepted. "Hey! Don't get in the way." "Oh? Was I not supposed to stand here?" I tilted my head, pretending innocence, and asked with a childlike curiosity. Who knew that my old delinquent demeanor would come in handy like this? "Sarah, by the way, did you have a chance to review the design document from the other day?" "Oh, yes. About that." Sarah caught on quickly and seamlessly joined the conversation. "Hey! Don't change the subject." "Oh, Stephen, are you curious too? Would you like me to explain the system structure?" I asked enthusiastically, as though I was thrilled to share. Reaching for the thick design document, I kept up the act. "No, I don't need. But it's such a great opportunity. Look, this flowchart here is particularly fascinating." As I passionately tried to explain, like a high school teacher enthusiastically lecturing, Stephen was completely taken aback. He started to say something but, unable to navigate the situation, left the conference room without another word. Phew. Sarah and I sighed in relief at the same time. "Michael, that was brilliant." Sarah gave a small laugh. "Well, I'm pretty good at that kind of acting." Scratching my head awkwardly to hide my embarrassment, she said, "But truly, thank you so much." No, you helped me earlier too, Sarah. It's mutual." Sarah glanced at the rice ball from before and quietly spoke. "Oh, the rice ball, please have a bite if you'd like." "Thank you." I took a bite, and the perfect balance of saltiness made my eyes widen in surprise. "Michael, I really think you're amazing," Sarah said suddenly. "What?" At first, I thought, oh no, a scary-looking guy has joined us. She smiled apologetically. "But after watching how you work, I realized I was the one learning so much." "That's an exaggeration." "No, it's true. You handle complex projects all on your own, take care of the juniors, and you're always there to help anyone in trouble." It was true that I couldn't stand seeing someone struggle without stepping in to help. What moved me the most was during the emergency late at night last month. Sarah's voice carried a hint of emotion. "When the data was lost, and we in sales were in complete panic, you stayed without a word, working through the night to recover everything." "Oh, that time. But that's just normal. I can't ignore people in trouble. That's what makes you amazing, the way you say things are normal." Sarah's eyes glimmered with a serious light. "That's the thing, Michael. What you see as normal is extraordinary to us. Your humility, your kindness in not ignoring people who are struggling. It's all inspiring. Sarah. When I ask for advice about work, you listen so carefully. When I'm in trouble, you come running without hesitation. Actually, it's me who should be thanking you. Just earlier, for instance. That's so like you, Michael. Always downplaying your own strengths. Even when people look down on you for being a temp, you silently deliver results. You don't hurt others, but you protect them. Watching you gives me the courage to be strong, too. I've been struggling with something for a long time. Sarah glanced towards the sunlight streaming into the room and began speaking softly. Ever since I was young, people always called me beautiful. It became everything they saw in me. In school, people would say, "Oh, Sarah is so pretty," or "It must be nice being good looking," or even, "I bet you only got hired because of your looks." I stayed silent, letting her words sink in. At some point, I think I began hiding behind that label of being beautiful. It felt safer to keep my distance from others rather than risk getting hurt. I smiled and acted friendly, but I never let anyone truly know me. Sarah paused briefly, then looked straight at me. "But working with you changed me, Michael." At first, I thought, here we go again, another person judging me by my looks. But you were different. Different? When I came to you for help with sales strategies, you took me seriously. You explained technical systems to me with so much patience. You didn't treat me like a beautiful woman. You treated me like a salesperson, a professional. Embarrassed, I averted my gaze. That's when I realized something. I had locked myself into this beautiful box all on my own. I built walls before others could build them. But I didn't have to do that. Sarah. That's not the case anymore. Now, even in business meetings with clients, I can clearly express my opinions. Just the other day, during a big meeting with only male colleagues, I even explained the technical aspects of the system. I used what Michael taught me and put it into my own words. Afterward, they said, "Sarah, you're amazing." And it wasn't about my looks. And it was about my work. With her eyes glistening, Sarah gave a soft smile. Maybe being beautiful is a part of who I am, but it's not all that I am. I can work hard, understand technology, and stand my ground when I need to. You helped me see that potential in myself, Michael. No, that's because of your effort, Sarah. There you go again, not accepting credit. But that's one of the wonderful things about you, Michael. The smile on Sarah's face, illuminated by the sunlight, no longer showed hesitation. There she stood, shedding her shell, radiating as a strong, independent woman. Before I realized it, we were looking at each other. The warm glow of the setting sun streaming into the conference room bathed Sarah's profile in a soft orange hue. Michael. Yes? Would you like another rice ball? Her hand, offering it as if to hide her embarrassment, trembled slightly. Oh, thank you. As I reached out to take it, our fingertips lightly brushed. For a moment, we both instinctively started to pull back but stopped. It's delicious. I'm glad. The air in the conference room felt inexplicably warm. Though unspoken, something new and unexplainable had clearly begun to grow between us. From then on, I found myself talking to Sarah more frequently. Michael, I need to consult with you about this design document. Sure, go ahead. About this section of the structure. Even in the break room, as I brewed coffee, she would often come over to chat. What started as work-related discussions gradually turned into casual conversations. You're surprisingly funny, Michael. Wait, what's that supposed to mean? At first, you seemed intimidating and unapproachable, but you're kind, dependable, and unexpectedly cute. Me? Cute? I let out a nervous laugh, trying to brush it off, and Sarah responded with a gentle smile. These exchanges didn't go unnoticed by Stephen, who watched us with a cold, disdainful gaze. Hey, temp. One day, while I was focused on my monitor, Stephen suddenly called out to me. Yes? I turned around to see him standing there, expressionless. You seem to have gotten quite friendly with Sarah. We're just discussing work. Don't think you can flirt with a full-time employee. You're a temp after all. At that moment, oh, Michael, about that matter we discussed the other day. Sarah happened to walk by and spoke to me with a smile. Hey! Stephen's voice suddenly grew louder. Sarah, don't you have work to do? Yes, but this is work-related too. Shut up. The atmosphere froze instantly. Don't get cocky for a temp worker. Stephen turned to face me. Go wipe down all the chairs. Yes. When you're done, clean the floors. Every corner, no exceptions. The next day, and the day after that, it was the same. I wasn't allowed to do any system development work, only an increasing pile of menial tasks. Hey! This chair still has dust on it. As soon as Stephen entered the conference room, he started shouting. I quietly checked the chair, but no matter where I looked, there wasn't any dust. I'm sorry, but could you show me where? Right here. He pointed at the chair, but there was nothing on it. Are you blind? Can't you see how dirty it is? The other employees around us wore uncomfortable expressions. It was obvious to everyone that this was just an excuse to harass me. I'll clean it again. Next, clean the restroom. Every corner, got it? Yes. Excuse me, Stephen. Sarah stood up. Michael is currently on a deadline for an important system maintenance task. Shut up. Stephen's roar echoed through the room. How long are you planning to side with a temp worker? But this is clearly wrong. Michael is a talented engineer. Why make him do this kind of? We don't have the luxury of keeping a temp who can't even handle basic chores. Starting tomorrow, you don't need to come in. Contract terminated. The room fell into a stunned silence. Please, wait. Sarah desperately protested. If Michael is gone, the system, Sarah. Stephen's voice was icy. Do you want to lose your job too, defending a temp? In that instant, the color drained from Sarah's face. I could see a storm of emotions flickering across her expression. Remittances, rent, living expenses. She had told me about the money she sent to support her parents' care. At that moment, something inside me shifted. Stephen. I stood up slowly, locking eyes with him. Understood. Thank you for everything up until now. What? Michael. Sarah's voice trembled. Sarah. When I turned to face her, my expression was unusually calm. Thank you. But it's okay. Thank you for everything. Bowing deeply, I walked back to my desk. As I packed up my belongings, Sarah's tearful face pierced my heart. But this was the best, no, the only kindness I could offer her right now. Michael. In the hospital rehabilitation room, Thomas was watching me with concern. Sorry, I got fired again. I said with a wry smile, sitting down in front of Thomas in his wheelchair. Tell me everything. His voice was surprisingly calm. After I finished recounting what had happened, Thomas let out a small sigh. You're really not cut out for working in an organization, are you? Unfortunately, no. I looked up at the ceiling. I guess I just can't work under someone else. That guy's unreasonable attitude, what happened with Sarah? I just couldn't take it. But you did your best. Thomas's voice was gentle. And you learned a lot in your own way, didn't you? Well, yeah. I let out a bitter laugh. But I can't compromise my principles. And that's perfectly fine. Thomas smiled softly. Just keep living the way you are, Michael. Thomas. Besides, His eyes took on a serious glint. You have someone to protect, don't you? What? That's Sarah. It seems like you care about her a lot. No. My cheeks grew hot. It's not like that. Really? His smile carried a knowing undertone. A few days passed after that. As the morning sun bathed the room, I found myself recalling Thomas's words. You have someone to protect, don't you? Sarah's smile suddenly surfaced in my mind. Her kind eyes, her earnest work ethic, and the fleeting expressions of vulnerability she occasionally showed. That tearful face I saw last still lingered deeply in my heart. I wondered how she was doing now. Was she enduring Stephen's unreasonable behavior all alone? The thought made my chest tighten. At that moment, my phone started vibrating. I reached into my pocket to check it. When I saw the name on the screen, my heart jumped. Sarah. With trembling fingers, I pressed the answer button. Hello? Is something wrong? Michael. Please help me. A tense voice came through the receiver. The system has completely gone down. We've lost communication with our clients and even our internal network. And there's no one here who can fix it. Stay calm. I'll be there right away. I hung up, quickly stuffed whatever materials I could find into my bag, and sprinted to the nearest station. When I arrived at Symphonia Systems, the office was in chaos, filled with shouts and the incessant ringing of phones. Employees were rushing around with anxious expressions. Michael. Sarah ran up to me. What's the status of the system? The main server isn't responding. Even the backup seems to have failed. Heading straight to the server room, I heard Stephen's angry voice echoing from within. What the hell is going on? Is there no one here who understands this system? Michael. A colleague called out as Stephen turned to see me. Who called him here? He's been fired. Ignoring his outburst, I opened my laptop and focused on the monitor. What exactly happened? Actually, Sarah began, her expression showing clear anger towards Stephen as she explained the situation. At first, it was just a minor network issue. It was something any of the system development staff could have handled easily, with minimal damage to the system. But then, Stephen made a reckless move. Perhaps due to his misplaced confidence from dabbling in system-related tasks. He ignored everyone's warnings and started tampering with the system's core settings on his own. However, when it came to programming, he was practically an amateur and had no understanding of how the system functioned. As expected, the system crashed, and the current situation was the disastrous result. I sighed quietly and focused on the code displayed on the monitor. Here it is. It seemed that Stephen had tampered with the security protocol settings, which were at the heart of the system. Internally fuming at his meddling, I began carefully repairing the code line by line. What do you think you're doing, Michael? The person responsible for this disaster was doing nothing but shouting angrily. You're not part of this company anymore. Get out now. I'll leave after fixing the system. I replied calmly, continuing to focus on debugging and verifying the code with all my effort. Michael. Sarah's concerned voice reached me as I worked. When I looked around, I noticed a growing crowd of employees silently watching my progress. It's okay. I'm proceeding carefully, so it will take some time, but I'll restore it for sure. As I pointed at the logs displayed on the screen and explained, the employees around me visibly relaxed. However, the monitor continued to show error messages, with no signs of improvement. If this persisted, it would disrupt data connections with clients, leading to massive losses for the company. The pressure and urgency caused sweat to trickle down my temple. I'll call security. Even Stephen's threats didn't register in my ears anymore. It's done. I finally showed the screen indicating normal operation. In that instant, the office erupted in cheers. The tension that had gripped everyone was released, and some even collapsed onto the floor in relief. Michael, thank you so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude. Sarah, visibly relieved, bowed deeply. The system returned to normal operation, and the damage to other connected systems was kept to a minimum. I also reinforced the backup system, ensuring the program was restructured to handle future issues efficiently. As relief spread through the office, Stephen crossed his arms and shot a cold glare in my direction. Why is someone who doesn't belong here still in this building? Stephen's voice rang out loudly. Stephen, what are you talking about? Ignoring Sarah's protest, he continued. I told you before. You're no longer associated with this company. That makes you an outsider, doesn't it? That's true, but if I hadn't come, the system would have been irreparably damaged. That's just an excuse. I'll press charges for trespassing. Hey! Security, get him out of here. At Stephen's shouting, two uniformed security guards hesitantly approached. However, they seemed unsure of the situation and simply exchanged puzzled glances. At that moment, the sound of heavy footsteps and a cane echoed down the hallway. An elderly gentleman appeared, his face lined with fatigue but radiating an unmistakable aura of dignity. There's no need for that, Stephen. What? Dad. Standing at the server room door was none other than Henry Sullivan, the president of Symphonia Systems and Stephen's father. Dad, why are you here? Stephen. Mr. Sullivan's voice grew sharper. It seems there's a lot you don't know. What do you mean? Stephen's face froze. Mr. Sullivan, looking at his son with a disgusted tone, revealed an unexpected truth. He is the one who built our company's system. The server room fell into stunned silence. What? No way. 10 years ago. Mr. Sullivan began to speak slowly. When I was hospitalized, I happened to meet a young man in the room next to mine. As he recounted the story, I too began reflecting on that fateful encounter. Hurry! His breathing is dropping. Henry, can you hear me? The voices of nurses and emergency doctors echoed in his semi-conscious state. Overworked as the president, he had collapsed suddenly at the office and was rushed to the hospital. Fortunately, he survived, and his recovery was deemed stable enough to move to a general ward. Normally, he would have been assigned a private room, but due to extensive hospital renovations at the time, there was a shortage of private accommodations. That's how he ended up next to Thomas's room, which was the beginning of it all. Excuse me, are you okay? Thomas's concerned voice broke through his groggy state. It seemed he had fallen asleep and unknowingly let out some groans. Ah, it seems I was having a bad dream, he said as he tried to sit up. Ouch. Wait a moment. Thomas skillfully maneuvered his wheelchair to his bedside. Michael, help out for a second. From the back of the room, I appeared. With practiced hands, I gently helped him sit up. Thank you, both of you. As his breathing steadied, he took a sip of water from the bedside pitcher and finally got a good look at our faces. Nice to meet you. I'm Henry. And your name is? I'm Thomas. I've been here a while, so feel free to ask me anything. Thomas explained that while he was already an adult, he had suffered a serious injury in an accident during his student days and was now devoting himself to treatment and rehabilitation. Thomas's unclouded smile seemed almost dazzling to Mr. Sullivan. And this is my older brother. He may not look it, but he's an incredibly hard worker. Hey, don't say too much about that. With a wry smile, I introduced myself and explained that I was working part-time while taking care of my brother and frequently visiting the hospital. From then on, whenever time allowed, we began sharing stories about ourselves. Our small interactions became a source of solace during his hospital stay. As usual, Thomas began boasting about me. And even though Michael sacrifices so much of his time, he's been teaching himself programming and creating his own software. He spoke enthusiastically, showing off a laptop. What? You made this yourself? Looking at the contents, Mr. Sullivan was speechless. Mistaking his reaction for a sign of worsening health, I asked with concern, "Are you okay? Do you need to lie down?" "No, that's not it. My body's fine. I'm just amazed." Back in high school, he was captivated by the world of programming where seemingly incomprehensible lines of code could bring characters to life exactly as he envisioned. That fascination drove him to pursue a career as a system engineer with relentless determination. However, after founding his own company, he became both physically and mentally exhausted. To gain recognition, he had to consistently deliver profits, and the constant pressure of ensuring the livelihoods of his employees left no room for failure. The weight of living in a world where everything was measured and judged by numbers wore him down. I barely spent time with my family, and even after my wife passed away, I devoted myself entirely to work. Then, in front of him, appeared us. I was now carrying on the dreams Thomas could no longer pursue, striving with all my might to carve out my own path. Our circumstances and the deep care we showed for each other stirred something in Mr. Sullivan's heart. "Michael, do you have more programs like this?" Sure." With that, I brought over my laptop. As Mr. Sullivan looked at the lines of code displayed on the screen, he was left speechless. "You taught yourself, and this is remarkable." The program I was working on happened to resemble the core elements of the system Mr. Sullivan had been struggling with at his company. Lifting his gaze to meet ours, he spoke with conviction. "Michael, Thomas, would you consider working with me?" "What?" "Actually, I'm planning to completely overhaul my company's system. But finding a talented system engineer who can build the kind of system I envision has been incredibly difficult." "Michael, I'm confident that you can create something extraordinary. So I'd like you to design and develop an entirely new system program for my company from scratch, and as a token of gratitude, I'll cover all of Thomas's medical expenses, including rehabilitation and living costs during the project." Mr. Sullivan's proposal left both of us stunned. With our parents' salaries barely enough to cover Thomas's treatment, I had been juggling multiple part-time jobs to support us. Despite my struggles and inability to secure a steady job due to my past, I had taught myself enough programming skills to reach this level for my brother's sake. Mr. Sullivan was deeply impressed by my determination. As a system engineer myself, when I looked at his code, it sent chills down my spine. Programming skills aren't something you can acquire overnight. And it takes relentless, painstaking effort, countless failures, and an unyielding determination to keep moving forward. Every single line of his code conveys that incredible dedication. The structure of his code is remarkably organized for someone self-taught, with efficient logic and, most importantly, a design philosophy that prioritizes the user above all else. "Michael, you are undoubtedly talented, and I'm certain you'll create something exceptional. Anyone who looks at your work can see it immediately." At Mr. Sullivan's words, I crossed my arms and thought for a while before responding, "I'll take on the challenge." Then, I began building the core system from scratch. "I see. So that's why Michael was so familiar with our system." Sarah's voice was followed by murmurs of understanding from the surrounding employees. The atmosphere in the server room felt as though all the lingering doubts had suddenly dissolved. Unable to endure the shift, Stephen's ragged breathing broke the silence. "Oomph. Sure, you might be able to build a system, but you're just a temp, aren't you? And now, you're nothing more than a fired temp worker." Stephen's voice trembled as he spoke. It was painfully obvious that his wounded pride was driving him to desperately try to demean me. "Unlike me, speeding down the path of the elite, you're nothing but a societal misfit. A shut-in who can't even hold a proper conversation. A failure that no one needs, a total loser." The louder Stephen's voice became, the more his words reeked of empty bravado. The once overbearing figure he had projected was nowhere to be seen. In his place stood a pitiable man, beginning to realize his own powerlessness. "Oh my, Stephen, whatever are you talking about? When did I ever say I was unemployed? Oh, come on, you're done as a system engineer, aren't you? After that, I made sure to spread plenty of rumors about you in the industry. I told everyone you were an irresponsible guy who suddenly disappeared and abandoned a critical project. No matter how skilled you are, no reputable company would take the risk of hiring someone like that, right? Your career is over, both as a programmer and as a system engineer. Nobody's going to let you handle any important systems ever again, are they? Ha ha ha. With a sinister grin, Stephen smugly spoke. Stephen. Mr. Sullivan attempted to counter Stephen's words, but I stepped forward to interrupt, standing in front of him. Stephen, thank you for your concern. I'm sorry for the delay, but here's my business card. As Stephen glanced at the card I held out, the color drained from his face. You, this company. The card bore the name of the trending IT venture, BS Technology. A few years ago, Thomas had established the company while still pursuing his studies. As an executive and systems engineer, I collaborated with various corporations, spearheading system development projects that earned widespread recognition within the industry. The unique aspect of having a president in a wheelchair, combined with Thomas's sharp intellect and business acumen, allowed him to seal deal after deal, further enhancing the company's reputation. In just 3 years, BS Technology had grown rapidly, reaching an annual revenue of nearly $10 million. Mr. Sullivan broke the silence with a heavy tone. Michael didn't work here for the money. I practically begged him to help strengthen our systems. He already has more than enough wealth. Then, why is a temp? One of the employees asked with genuine curiosity. That's because I wanted to understand what a company is like from the inside, so I joined as a temp. I wanted him to work as a full-time employee, but he flatly refused, saying he was already an employee of BS Technology. Mr. Sullivan's wry smile spoke volumes about my stubbornness. That said, even in emergencies like today, I'll always respond. Of course. Turning to Mr. Sullivan, I gave him a sly grin. I'll be sending you the invoice. The room erupted in laughter. Ha ha. Spoken like someone who runs a multi-million-dollar company. Even during his recovery, Mr. Sullivan clapped me on the shoulder with surprising strength. In the business world, goodwill alone isn't enough to keep things running. As I stepped out of the company to head home, the surroundings were already shrouded in darkness. Michael. I turned to see Sarah jogging after me. Sarah. When I turned around, her expression suggested she had something she wanted to say. Seeing her like this, she looked even more beautiful than before, so much so that I couldn't help but stare. Thank you for today. It's nothing. Not knowing what kind of expression to make, I tried to keep my composure. I didn't realize that you were with BS Technology. The faintly glowing streetlights reflected in her eyes. If anything, I'm sorry. It might feel like I deceived you. No, that's not it. That's not why I came to talk to you. She paused for a moment. Can we meet again? Her words echoed through the quiet evening streets, leaving me momentarily stunned. Her cheeks flushed red as she glanced up at me shyly. Her endearing gesture made me catch my breath. Ah, of course. At that moment. Sarah. Wait. Stephen's voice rang out through the night. He approached, holding an extravagant bouquet and dressed in a designer suit. What once might have seemed imposing now looked small and insignificant in my eyes. Stephen. I've already told you many times, haven't I? I'm not interested. Sarah's voice trembled. Without thinking, I stepped half a pace forward in front of her. Come on, I've booked a table at the finest French restaurant tonight. There's even talk of a promotion. No. Sarah's voice shook, but it carried a firm resolve. Please. Stop approaching me. I don't want this anymore. Stephen, can't you see she doesn't want this? When I spoke to check him, Stephen's eyes turned sharp. This is none of your business. Get out of my way. He tried to shove me aside, but I didn't budge an inch. Hey! You're an outsider. A fired temp like you has no place here. He reached out to grab Sarah's arm. Don't touch her. My voice, calm and steady, cut through the air. Ah! The moment Stephen met my gaze, the color drained from his face. I'm sorry. Muttering hastily, he bolted from the scene. Are you okay? That must have been terrifying. I'm sorry. Even I was startled by how low and firm my voice had sounded. Had I scared her? When I turned to look at Sarah, she shook her head gently. No, that's not it. Thank you for protecting me. In that moment, illuminated by the streetlight, her smile was the most beautiful I had ever seen. I like you, Michael. Ever since you left, it felt like a hole had opened in my heart, and I realized just how big of a presence you were to me. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. I like you too, Sarah. My voice was hoarse, but I managed to convey my feelings clearly. I'm so happy. Gently, I wrapped my arms around her small shoulders, holding her close. A few weeks later, the chaos caused by the internal system disruption led Mr. Sullivan to secretly investigate the behavior of his son, Stephen, which he had long found suspicious. What he uncovered was a string of misdeeds committed while he was away from the company. They are from persistent harassment of female employees to numerous acts of embezzlement, and even criminal-like activities involving client company staff. Each revelation was more appalling than the last. The sheer weight of his son's actions left Mr. Sullivan so shocked that he fell ill from the stress. Dad, this has to be a mistake. There's no way I'd do anything that could get me arrested. But Stephen's desperate cries were in vain. With his true character fully exposed, the foundation of status and authority he had built crumbled entirely. Stephen was summarily dismissed without question. Though his father showed him a final act of mercy by ensuring he avoided prosecution, there was no place left for him in the company or anywhere else. Symphonia Systems experienced a temporary decline in sales due to Stephen's misconduct. However, under a reorganized leadership structure, the company embarked on a fresh start. Labor regulations were revised, introducing management systems to prevent future misconduct and restructuring personnel policies to prevent power from concentrating in the hands of a select few. With Sarah at the forefront, a more employee-friendly environment was being steadily established. Meanwhile, at BS Technology, I was deeply engrossed in developing a new system in one of the office rooms. Another all-nighter, Michael? Yeah, but I'm almost done. Thomas looked at me with concern as I continued to focus on the lines of code displayed on the screen. You're the president, you know. You should take it easy. Trying to lighten the mood, I gave Thomas a playful nudge on the shoulder. Got it, but promise me you won't skip meals like you did yesterday. Yeah, I know. Now that the employees have gone home. This quiet time when the president and the employee revert to simply being brothers has become a heartwarming moment for me. Thanks to the new close ties formed with Symphonia Systems, BS Technology has secured several new contracts, and revenue continues to climb steadily. Tonight, I have a long-awaited dinner date with Sarah at an elegant restaurant. I've sworn to myself that tonight, I'll make it happen. Sarah. Yes? After finishing most of our meal, we sipped wine together. Tonight, Sarah looked more stunning than ever in a chic navy dress and her long hair styled in loose waves, accentuating her beauty even more. I spent most of my life hiding behind a facade, trying to protect myself. But meeting you made me question whether that version of myself was truly who I am. Michael. But I don't think it was all for nothing. Because of it, I was able to protect both Thomas and you. I knelt on the floor, reaching into my pocket to retrieve a small box. That's why. I want to keep protecting you. As family. I opened the box to reveal a ring. "Will you marry me?" In that moment, tears welled up in Sarah's eyes and rolled down her cheeks. "Yes. I would be honored." She gave me the same radiant smile I had fallen for long ago. Everyone has the ability to overcome past failures and move forward. I was once shackled by my delinquent past, unable to trust others. But I came to realize that there are people who see and appreciate my efforts, and that awareness became the driving force to help others. It is because we have people to protect that we find strength. It is because we have people to love that we can keep moving forward. Rather than being weighed down by past mistakes, I've chosen to use them as a springboard to carve a brighter path ahead. I only hope to continue living in a way that honors that choice and the people I cherish. This is on me. Enjoy it. The sharp smell of alcohol and Michael's loud voice snapped me back to reality. I slowly shifted my gaze toward Sophia. At that moment, it felt like something inside me snapped. Sophia is crying. That brave, steadfast girl who always tried not to show any weakness is crying. That sight ignited the flames of anger within me. How about it? This is premium champagne. You should be honored to savor it with your whole body. Even though I was on the verge of exploding with rage, Michael remained oblivious, spouting nonsense like that. The fact that Sophia resembles my late wife only fueled my emotions, and I finally erupted like never before. The contract is off. My name is David. This year, I turned 65. Unlike my younger days, my body doesn't move the way I want it to, and I often feel my age. Still, I haven't completely retired from society yet. I'm technically the chairman of a company. Although my son has taken over as the president and actual decision maker, making me more of a figurehead. It all began back when I was in college. Let's create a company that brings smiles to everyone's faces. It started with such a vague idea, no clear goals, just enthusiasm. Today, it's not unusual to see high schoolers starting companies and becoming CEOs, but back then, it was rare. The company was casually established with a few classmates, and before I knew it, we gained supporters and eventually incorporated. I worked part-time jobs, but as a student, there was only so much I could earn. On top of that, I had to contribute to my family, so I couldn't spend much freely. The idea of bringing smiles to everyone stemmed from my upbringing. I came from a low-income family. Being raised by a single mother, which was uncommon at the time, I faced countless challenges. But every time, my mother would smile and say, "No matter how tough things get, keep smiling, and someday, things will get better." She believed that negative thinking would attract more negativity, creating a spiral that's hard to escape. Though it sounded a bit spiritual, I followed her advice, always keeping a smile even during tough times. Gradually, my circumstances improved. I got into college and managed to attend all 4 years without taking any breaks. Thanks to interest-free student loans. I even enjoyed my part-time jobs. I believe that staying positive brought me the opportunities one have today. My mother has since passed away, but I'm sure she's watching over me and her grandchildren from heaven. Even now, I find it hard to believe that the company has grown into a major corporation generating billions in revenue. It feels like an endless dream I never wake from. Now, in my old age, I've stepped back from the front lines and enjoy a peaceful life with my wife. I have a son and a daughter. My son is 35 this year, and my daughter, born when I was 40, is now 25. Dad, I'm heading to work. Just as I returned home, my daughter, Sophia, was heading out for her job. Without going into too much detail, Sophia doesn't work during the day but heads out for a part-time job at night. People might have their opinions. But this is the path Sophia, my wife, and I have agreed on. No matter what others say, I want Sophia to follow the path she believes in, as long as it doesn't involve breaking the law. Supporting that is a parent's duty. These days, the warmer weather brings more weird people out, so be careful. Dad. How old do you think I am? But thanks, I'm off. With a dazzling smile, Sophia disappeared into the night. When I stepped inside, a fresh fragrance greeted me. I glanced toward the source of the scent and saw a vase filled with colorful flowers. Apparently, Sophia had stopped by a flower shop and bought them on a whim. Sophia carries so much on her shoulders for her age. With her natural cheerfulness, she never shows weakness to others, always smiling and kind. That's why I worry about her sometimes. Well, worrying about it won't change anything. Sophia is simply living life the way she wants, and all we can do is step back and watch over her. I said to my wife, who greeted me at the door. She responded with the same gentle smile Sophia often had. One day, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Michael, an old classmate. "You're coming, right?" Yeah, sure, count me in." I was startled when our rarely used landline blared loudly. To my surprise, it was an invitation to a class reunion. And to top it off, the organizer was none other than Michael. That alone sapped me of any enthusiasm. Michael was a former classmate who went to the same schools as me from elementary through high school. Unlike me, Michael came from a wealthy family and constantly flaunted it, which annoyed everyone around him. Though I doubt he ever realized how irritating he was. Suddenly, memories from high school came flooding back. It was September of our senior year, still warm, but not unbearably so, unlike today's extended summers. "You're not seriously planning to attend such a mediocre university, are you?" I went to a public high school known for its academic rigor. Being from a low-income family, I couldn't afford private schools, so I aimed for the best public school in the area. Somehow, Michael ended up there too. Given his family's wealth, he could have easily attended a prestigious private school. But the reason Michael ended up in the same school as me was simple. I'd been competing with you since middle school, and now, at the very end, you're just giving up? Apparently, Michael had decided I was his rival. Not to brag, but I was pretty good academically, always ranking in the top 3 out of nearly 200 students in middle school. People even suggested I could get a scholarship to a private school. But even with a scholarship, there would still be other expenses, and I didn't want to burden my mother further. Public school was my only option from the start. I thought Michael and I would part ways after middle school, so I was shocked when he ended up at the same high school. When I decided to pursue a language-focused university, Michael was completely bewildered. "I'm going to go to a place where I can learn how to run a business. I have a dream to be a president in the future. What does it matter if I can speak other languages nowadays? If I can speak Japanese, my mother tongue, that's all that matters." At the time, globalization wasn't as advanced as it is now, so he had a point. But now, I'm glad I chose to study languages in an environment where I could focus on them. Michael and I lost touch after our university applications and hadn't spoken until now, at the age of 65. He must have gotten my home phone number from a mutual acquaintance. By this age, most people had retired or were using re-employment programs. So the idea was to gather and reminisce about life. On the day of the reunion, the scene before me was absurd. Michael, drunk, rambled on about the past, mocking me in the process. This guy went to some run-of-the-mill university, wasted 4 years playing around, then got married to a woman 8 years younger at 30. And now, here I am, watching the downfall of my former rival. It's sad, really. As Michael said, my wife is much younger than me and still actively working. He cracked crude jokes about my taste in women, laughing obnoxiously. Meanwhile, he boasted endlessly about running his own company. I've hit the peak of my life. Hey, do you know this artist? I've been following them on video platforms since they debuted. His conversations jumped from one topic to another, leaving everyone struggling to keep up. Michael's self-centered rambling turned the reunion into his personal bragging session, and everyone else was visibly put off. "Michael, that's enough. It's getting late. Let's wrap this up," I finally said. Unsurprisingly, he grumbled about me taking charge. But my words prompted others to agree it was time to leave, and the chaotic reunion came to an end. Not long after, I unexpectedly ran into Michael again in the hallway of a certain company. The company in question turned out to be the one where Michael served as CEO. The moment he saw me, he smirked. "What's this? Are you working here as a janitor because you're out of money?" Honestly, if you'd just gone to an elite university like I did, you wouldn't have ended up with such a pathetic life. Do you even realize how much potential you wasted? His provocative tone irritated me slightly, but we were both 65. There was no point in engaging in petty arguments at this stage of life, so I chose to ignore him. This seemed to bother him, as he fell into step beside me, keeping pace as I walked away. "Hey, don't you dare ignore me." The nerve of a janitor to snub me. Have you forgotten that my company contracts work from yours? Or maybe, since you're just a temp worker, you wouldn't even know about that. He burst out laughing, thoroughly enjoying himself. If the cleaning staff were employees of my company, he might have known better. But since the cleaning service was outsourced, he assumed I was one of the cleaners, looking down on me all the while. I couldn't help but feel exasperated, and my initial anger dissipated entirely. Anger, I believe, is a waste of energy. If there's time to be angry, it's better to use that energy rationally. This is just my philosophy, of course. But talking to Michael was pointless, he'd only hurl more insults. So I decided to keep ignoring him. However, Michael's short temper reached its limit and he yelled, You're so infuriating." With that, he deliberately kicked over a bucket that a real janitor had left nearby. The water spilled all over me, soaking my suit. "Hey, that's enough." I voiced my protest briefly, to which Michael nonchalantly replied, "Well, if you're a janitor, you can clean it up yourself. Oh, and if the hallway stays wet, I'll cancel the contract. Anyway, I'm busy, so I'm out." After spouting his nonsense, he stepped into the elevator without a second glance. What a disaster. As I sighed and looked down at my soaked suit, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, I saw Sophia standing there. "Dad, what happened? Your suit is completely drenched." "Sophia, why are you here?" "I just had some errands to run." "Never mind about me here, let me help you dry off." Sophia pulled a neat handkerchief from her bag and started wiping my suit. But I gently stopped her. "That handkerchief was a birthday gift from your mother, wasn't it? The water came from that bucket, it's not clean. Besides, your clothes might get dirty." "Don't worry, I always carry a spare suit for situations like this." At that moment, my secretary appeared. "Oh, your secretary, he's quite young, isn't he?" "Yes, he just graduated from high school." My secretary, who had been promoted to this role immediately after entering the workforce, quickly assessed the situation and turned on his heel to fetch a new suit. While he still had much to learn, his ability to absorb information and adapt quickly allowed him to pick up skills rapidly. It was what you'd call a potential hire. I didn't view him through a prejudiced lens. I simply recognized the innate qualities he possessed and believed he could grow into an extraordinary asset in the future. Granted, working as the secretary to a chairman who has stepped back from the front lines might not provide many learning opportunities. Nevertheless, I changed into the suit he brought back and managed to make it to my next engagement on time. Sophia, having finished her errands, mentioned that we should all have dinner together as a family of 4 for the first time in a long while. "Dad, you and my brother work too much," Sophia said. "Well, I'm one thing, but your brother is young and carries the responsibility of many lives as the head of the company. Still, even he needs to take breaks sometimes." It was a rare and enjoyable evening spent together as a family. But the very next day. "Tonight? That's pretty short notice." "Oh, I see, declining isn't an option." "All right, let them know I'll attend." After hanging up the phone with my secretary, I let out a sigh. A last-minute dinner with a client's CEO had been scheduled for 7 p.m. that evening. Apparently, it was a spur-of-the-moment idea on their part. How incredibly rude. The secretary, caught in a difficult position, looked relieved when I agreed to attend the dinner, albeit reluctantly. Normally, I would have declined outright, but given who was involved, I couldn't afford to do so. The designated restaurant was a high-end establishment. When Michael saw me enter, his expression was one of surprise. "What, you work at this company? Let me guess, you must have sweet-talked your way into an executive position. People like you who are useless should just get out of the company already. I hear the CEO is a young guy. Until he gets here, you can keep me company." It seemed Michael was unaware that I was the chairman. Unlike me, who built my company from scratch, Michael had taken over as CEO a few years ago when his father handed over the reins. Since his company had only been a client of ours for about a year, it wasn't surprising that he didn't know my position. Still, it struck me as a lack of basic research on his part. The employees around me looked concerned, but I reassured them. "No, it's fine. Don't say anything. He's an acquaintance of mine, after all. I'll handle it. Just leave it be for now." My son was delayed due to urgent matters and wouldn't be able to join for another 30 minutes. That left me to hold the fort for the time being. As planned, the drinks and course meals began arriving at the table. And then, the champagne that Michael had specifically ordered was brought to the table by none other than Sophia. "Sophia? You work here?" I knew she worked nights at a high-end restaurant, but I never imagined it would be this one. Typically dressed casually in t-shirts and jeans, Sophia looked professional and polished in her uniform. When our eyes met, she smiled faintly. "Welcome, Dad." Michael didn't miss that remark. Despite spending the evening boasting to his subordinates and making them visibly uncomfortable, he immediately turned his attention to Sophia. Well, so your daughter works here, huh? Figures. With the failure of a father like you, it's no wonder his child isn't much better." He spouted this baseless insult. And Sophia froze, her eyes wide in disbelief as she stared at him. I, too, was momentarily at a loss for words, stunned that he would suddenly demean my daughter like that. Sensing an opportunity, Michael's mouth kept running. "Now that I look closely, she's quite pretty, isn't she? Great figure, too. Dress her in something nice, and she'd be stunning. How about it? Why not marry her off to my eldest son? He's overseas right now, but if he gets married, it'd keep him from wandering around and bring him back to the US. What an unbelievably rude thing to say. In this day and age, making comments about a woman's appearance like that is generally seen as inappropriate. On top of that, suggesting she marry his eldest son without her input is completely unacceptable. What really infuriated me was that he wasn't considering Sophia's happiness, he was just trying to use her as a way to keep his son tied down in the US. Anger is a waste of energy. That's what I've always believed. But for the first time in a long while, I could feel myself being overtaken by that very emotion. Looking at Sophia's bewildered and hurt expression, I found it impossible to stay calm. I tried to hold back, but Michael delivered the final blow. "What's with that look?" Apparently, Sophia's silence annoyed him. The smug grin he had been wearing moments earlier disappeared, replaced by sudden anger. Seriously, young women these days are so useless. Maybe it's time someone taught you some respect. Hey, hand me that champagne. To my shock, Michael snatched the expensive champagne and poured it over Sophia's head. The liquid dripped from her hair, falling to the floor in slow motion, as if time itself had paused. "This one's on me. Enjoy it." The strong stench of alcohol in Michael's booming voice jolted me back to my senses. Slowly, I turned my gaze toward Sophia. At that moment, it felt like something inside me snapped. Sophia is crying. That brave, steadfast daughter of mine, who always tried not to show any weakness, is crying. That sight ignited the flames of anger deep within me. How is it? It's premium champagne, you should be honored to experience it with your whole body, right? Michael, oblivious to my simmering rage, continued his shameless tirade. The fact that Sophia bore an uncanny resemblance to my late wife only added fuel to the fire, and I finally erupted in a way I never had before. The contract is off. What? What are you suddenly talking about? There's no way you have the authority to do that. Inside, I felt a fiery heat coursing through me. And why wouldn't I? With all those emotions erupting inside me, it was only natural. Still, years of experience had taught me that losing my temper wasn't dignified. So I resolved to handle the situation with as much composure as I could muster. Whether or not an abrupt contract termination counts as calm was debatable. But I at least intended to maintain the decorum of an honorary chairman. I may have stepped back from the front lines, but that doesn't mean I've relinquished my authority. My son, the current president, is still a newcomer to management. As the former president, I continue to guide him when necessary, which gives me the right to make decisions in matters like this. I'd judged it impossible to continue our partnership with a company whose leader behaves so disgracefully. Michael's confusion was evident, but one of his subordinates hurriedly explained the situation. In an instant, Michael's face paled. You're the honorary chairman? Of a company with annual revenue exceeding $500 million? I had no idea. You think you can bluff your way out of this? That won't work on me, I said sharply, cutting off his stammered excuses. Michael fell silent. His employees likely knew of my position but lacked the courage to interrupt his incessant monologue to tell him. The tension in the room was palpable. I called over the restaurant manager, who had been nervously hovering nearby, and asked him to take care of Sophia. After confirming that Sophia had left the scene, I turned back to Michael. You've crossed a line. As a result, you've jeopardized a valuable business relationship. While I try to keep personal matters out of my work, what you did today cannot be overlooked. Reflect on your behavior as a person. As I stood to leave, Michael grabbed my hand in a panic and began pleading. Wait. No. I misunderstood the situation. Misunderstood? I asked, glaring at him. What excuse do you think will work now? Under my gaze, Michael shrank back, his body trembling slightly. Realizing the irreparable damage to his company if the contract was voided, he forced a strained smile and began to explain himself. I thought you were just some assistant or something. I didn't think someone like you could be an executive, so I was just putting on an act. So, let me get this straight, I replied, my voice sharp. You assumed I was just someone's assistant. And because of that, you thought it was acceptable to humiliate my daughter, thinking she was merely a part-time worker. Is that it? I'm deeply disappointed in you. Michael had no response. It's true that Sophia is a part-time worker here. She has other responsibilities during the day, so she isn't a full-time employee. But Michael decided to look down on her and treated her with complete disrespect. Such behavior is utterly inexcusable. Michael's face grew paler, and his body trembled even more. Please, forgive me. I didn't mean it. I glanced at Michael as he begged for forgiveness but said nothing and left the restaurant. Outside, my secretary was waiting and asked what had happened. After explaining, he looked utterly dejected. I placed a hand on his shoulder. This isn't something you need to feel bad about or apologize for. This is entirely Michael's fault, and that's all there is to it. Now, let's head back to the office. We need to review our future dealings with his company. The secretary nodded quietly and hurried off to get the car. Just then, Sophia approached me, looking distressed. Dad! I'm so sorry. This whole mess happened because of me. I can't believe I caused so much trouble. And crying like that, it was so embarrassing. I'm really sorry. She apologized repeatedly, blaming herself. Though her tears had stopped, her eyes were red from rubbing them. Seeing her like that, my anger began to boil again, so I took a deep breath to calm myself. Sophia, don't cry anymore, I said gently, wiping her tears away. Don't cry. You're not at fault. More importantly, you must be feeling terrible after having alcohol poured on you when you don't even like it. I spoke to the manager, so you should call it a day and head home. But Sophia, ever the responsible one, shook her head. No, it's fine. Thank you for worrying about me, Dad, but the man from earlier is leaving anyway. I'll finish my shift properly and then head home. See you later, Sophia said softly as she returned to the restaurant. The next day, as expected, Michael came to our office. I had already explained everything to my son, telling him to focus on his responsibilities while I handled the aftermath with Michael. In other words, it was up to me to deal with him. I'm truly sorry for what happened yesterday. I wasn't myself at the time. I know an apology can't fix this, but I really am sorry, Michael said, appearing regretful. While he seemed genuinely apologetic, my anger was far from subsiding. After all, Sophia had ended up leaving work early due to illness after the incident. She had endured having alcohol poured over her head despite her aversion to it. It must have pushed her to her limit. When the restaurant manager called to inform me, I rushed to pick her up, only to find her pale and in tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sophia kept apologizing repeatedly in the car, barely managing to hold back her nausea. Her kind heart made her feel guilty for the trouble she thought she had caused, even though she was the victim. Michael's behavior had been completely out of line from the start. Inviting someone to dinner on such short notice was already rude. But his actions sealed the deal. I had no intention of letting him off the hook. An apology doesn't erase what happened yesterday, I said firmly. I know that. It's just, I didn't realize you were the honorary chairman of such a major company. If I had known. Michael stammered. My eyebrow twitched. It felt like he was apologizing because of my title, and that only solidified my resolve to hold him accountable. Michael, I understand what you're saying. I'll accept your apology for now, but my decision on the contract remains unchanged. Surely, you understand that trust is the foundation of any agreement. You destroyed that trust with your actions. Michael, seemingly aware of his mistake, slumped his shoulders and left the office. This was the right decision. But I also felt that he owed Sophia a direct apology. Just as I was thinking this, my secretary called to inform me that someone had come to see me. It turned out to be Sophia. Dad, I have a favor to ask. Is that promise from before still valid? Sophia asked hesitantly. The promise she was referring to was likely from 3 years ago. It was when Sophia turned 22 and graduated from college. At the time, I had asked her if there was anything she wanted as a graduation gift. Go ahead, tell me what you'd like, I had said. But Sophia, smiling, had shaken her head. No, it's fine. Just the thought means so much to me. Besides, you covered all my tuition and living expenses for 4 years of college, didn't you? Honestly, I feel like you've already done more than enough. She had always been modest and hesitant to ask for anything. At the time, the company was going through a rough patch due to the economic downturn and global instability, which had affected our profits. That may have made Sophia even more considerate and reluctant to ask for anything. Well then, if you ever think of something you'd like, just let me know, I had said. When I made the offer, Sophia had simply replied, maybe someday, and never brought it up again. Instead, she used her first paycheck to buy us gifts or surprised us with a trip for just the two of us. It often feels like, as parents, we think we're giving, but in reality, we're the ones always receiving from her. Through everything, Sophia had never asked me for anything until now. At this moment, she finally decided to take me up on that long-forgotten promise. "I just don't want to see you and him at odds like this," she said quietly. Before I could ask what she meant, she pulled something out of her bag. "Yesterday, when I got in your car, I found this on the back seat. This guy, he's the one, right?" She showed me a photograph, and I was momentarily speechless. It was a picture of me with friends from our childhood, those I had shared my school days with. It showed me 2 childhood friends, and this. "You found it in the back seat?" Actually, when I heard about the reunion, I felt a bit nostalgic and pulled out some old photos. "This one is my favorite. There's been a lot between him and me, but..." I chuckled, realizing how stubborn I'd become with age. The truth was, I didn't dislike Michael. His constant need to compete with me had been annoying at times, but deep down, he wasn't a bad person. Of course, what happened yesterday was unforgivable, but the apology Michael gave earlier seemed genuine. He truly seemed to regret his actions. I couldn't bring myself to forgive him immediately, though, as I was still grappling with my feelings. "Fine, Sophia, do as you wish," I finally said. Sophia's face lit up with a bright smile, as if the tears from yesterday had never happened. "Thank you. All right, Dad, I'll be counting on you for this. Leave it to me." Having said everything she wanted, Sophia left, her demeanor cheerful and light. But just as I thought she was gone, she returned. "Oh, I almost forgot. The flowers. Why don't you put them in the CEO's office?" "Wait here, I'll go get them." 30 minutes later, Sophia came back holding the same flowers she had once placed in our entryway. Their pleasant fragrance seemed to cleanse the tense atmosphere in the room. This time, Sophia truly left for the day. As I carried on with my usual tasks, my secretary returned from his errands. The moment he stepped into the room, he immediately noticed the flowers. "Oh, these? My daughter gave them to me. Is something bothering you? Do they seem out of place?" When I asked, he paused thoughtfully for a moment before shaking his head with a smile and saying it must have just been his imagination. A few days later, I called Michael in for a discussion about the recent events. When he arrived, he looked visibly worn out, as if weighed down by everything happening around him. "What now? Are you planning to lecture me again? I get it already, I've done something irreversible. I underestimated you and insulted your daughter. And now my company is taking a massive hit. I'm done with all this. But if you still feel the need to lecture me..." Before he could finish, I cut him off. I'm not the kind of man to dwell on the past and harp on old grievances. But that doesn't mean I've completely let go of my anger. The thing I can't forgive is how you insulted my daughter. So, I've decided to make it up to her in my own way. If you truly regret your actions, then shut up and join me for a meal." Michael frowned, clearly confused. I wasn't reversing the cancelled contract, nor was I planning to scold him further. Instead, I had suddenly suggested having a meal together, leaving Michael puzzled about my intentions. A month later, we met at a small bar I frequented. The bar was dimly lit, with a long counter table and just 2 small tables for 4. It was my favorite spot, a cozy, hidden gem of a place. "Tonight's on me. Order whatever you like. Did you eat something weird or what?" Given how tense things had been between us until recently, my sudden offer of a drink made the furrow in Michael's brow deepen even further. Still, he couldn't seem to refuse, so he casually ordered a draft beer. Taking a sip, he let out an exclamation of surprise. "What is this? It's so crisp and easy to drink. Good, isn't it? I heard you've been drinking champagne in high-end establishments. Let me tell you. Even a simple beer in a bar like this can be excellent. Noticing that Michael wasn't usually a fan of beer, the bartender added ice cubes to his glass. If you use pure ice, it doesn't dilute the beer too quickly, keeping the taste intact. Plus, for those who aren't fond of beer, the slight dilution as the ice melts makes it smoother to drink. While purists might argue against putting ice in beer, this way of drinking has its merits, doesn't it? I said, turning to the bartender, who responded with a smile. Despite Michael's refined palate, the food here suited him well, and he ate with genuine enjoyment. To think I've lived 65 years without tasting something this good, except for my mom's cooking, of course, he said. His tone softened by the alcohol. It was as if the grating personality he'd shown recently had vanished, and the Michael I remembered from our younger days had returned. The reason I could never truly hate Michael, even to the very end, was probably because of the memories we shared from our elementary school days. Back then, we didn't compete over grades or accomplishments. It was silly things, like who could catch the most beetles or stay underwater the longest. Michael, born into a wealthy family and destined to become a CEO, gradually grew fixated on grades and status as we got older. Our paths began to diverge in middle school, but tonight's atmosphere felt like a throwback to those carefree summers of elementary school. A while later, the lights in the bar grew slightly brighter. "Is something going on?" Michael asked. "Yes. The bartender here loves music and often uses his connections to bring in performers. Sometimes it's well-known artists, and other times it's up-and-coming singers. Tonight, there's a live acoustic performance by a singer-songwriter." Michael's expression shifted subtly at the mention of this. As expected, I feigned ignorance, though I was already piecing it all together. Before long, the star of the evening appeared. Her face was concealed, keeping her identity a mystery. She picked up what appeared to be her favorite acoustic guitar and began to play. At that moment, Michael let out a small, "Ah." I chuckled and said, "You're a fan of hers, aren't you?" At the reunion, you couldn't stop talking about how much her music inspires you and lifts your spirits. Your enthusiasm was so intense that everyone just laughed it off, but it was clear how much you admired her. I approached the bar's owner with a suggestion. If the singer had any free time, she could perform here. The owner, with whom I've had over a decade of friendship, readily agreed. Although the artist was still relatively unknown, her crystal-clear voice and the soothing tones of her acoustic guitar created a perfect harmony. Even customers who had never seen her before were completely captivated by her performance. After performing a few songs, she finished her set, and the room erupted in applause. At that moment, she removed her mask, and Michael froze in shock. "Good evening." "It's been a while," she said. The mysterious artist was none other than my daughter, Sophia. After graduating college, Sophia had started a job but left within a year. At first, I worried, wondering why someone as dedicated as Sophia would leave so soon. Her reason, however, was anything but negative. "Dad, I've always wanted to be an artist. My dream is to perform at Budokan with just my acoustic guitar. I know it sounds reckless, but it's something I truly want to achieve," she had told me. She also revealed something else then: she had a fiancé. At the time, he was just her boyfriend, but they had already promised to marry. Unfortunately, her fiancé, Ryan, had been diagnosed with a rare illness that left him partially blind and physically impaired. He was undergoing rehabilitation, unable to leave the hospital until he regained basic mobility. Sophia's dream of becoming an artist was fueled by his encouragement. He had praised her voice and her guitar playing, which she had started as a hobby, and she wanted to inspire him in return. No matter what obstacles stand in his way, Ryan never gives up hope. Even in life-threatening situations, he underwent risky surgeries and survived. He's cheering me on from his hospital room, so I'm determined to perform at Budokan for him and for myself. Sophia's powerful words resonated with the audience, who cheered her on enthusiastically. She left the stage amidst applause and soon joined us at our table. Michael, who had been visibly flustered, finally snapped out of it and bowed his head deeply. "I'm so sorry for what I said and did. I know an apology isn't enough, but still." Sophia forgave him without hesitation. "Everyone makes mistakes. I understand you've been dealing with a lot of stress, especially with your son's sudden illness, haven't you?" "Wait, that story, could it be?" Michael stammered. Yes, Sophia's fiancé was none other than Michael's second son, Ryan. My eldest son has been aimlessly wandering abroad, so I decided my second son, Ryan, would take over the company. But one day, he fell seriously ill. At one point, they told us his condition was critical. I had been living a life where I neglected my family entirely, Michael admitted. As a result, his wife and children had distanced themselves from him, and it was only then that he realized the foolishness of his choices. Even so, my second son, Ryan, was the only one who reached out to me. He was such a kind-hearted boy. Thanks to him, I was able to rebuild my life with my family. And yet, it was right after this that Ryan's illness was discovered, and Michael began to lose his emotional stability. He had thought that securing a major contract with my company would ensure the future of his business. However, as he tried to find and train a new successor, his mismanagement drove employees to resign in droves. I took a deep breath and offered a suggestion. Your company was struggling from the start, wasn't it? Actually, your youngest son came to me directly about this. What? My youngest? Why bring him up now? Just listen, I said, signaling my secretary, who entered the room with a bow. Why are you here? Michael asked in disbelief. He insisted, saying, I only have a high school diploma, so I can't do the things my brothers or father can. But I have a great memory and strong communication skills. I found his determination amusing, so I decided to keep him by my side. This time, I was moved by the initiative of your children, and that's why I'm here to propose a partnership between our companies. Michael stared intently at the documents I handed him. Also, this photo reminded me of the past. What you did wasn't right, but I understand you've been going through a lot. We might not go back to catching beetles, but I hope we can return to a similar friendship. That's what I'd like to see. Hearing this, Michael lowered his head and replied in a faint voice. But this doesn't seem like it offers much benefit for you. If I only cared about benefits, my company wouldn't have grown into a global enterprise, I replied with a smile. While I once said I started my company on a whim, it wasn't as if I had no goals at all. I was in a language studies program, so I spent my student years interacting with people from all over the world. That's where the idea came from, to build an amazing company that could bring smiles to everyone across the globe. I even got involved in volunteer work. It didn't offer any financial benefits, but I gained something invaluable: connections, experiences, and intangible things that enriched my life. You're part of that, too, Michael, I added. At this, Michael, uncharacteristically for his age, began to cry, and his youngest son, my secretary, awkwardly tried to console him. He repeated his apologies and expressions of gratitude to us. Later, we launched a project leveraging Michael's company's unique expertise, eventually finalizing an agreement for a business partnership. Thanks to our secretary. Michael's youngest son, who reached out to former employees, many of them returned to the company. Looks like he's been doing a lot of thinking, Michael said. Probably because he knows his own strengths and used them to their fullest. Academic credentials and qualifications matter. But recognizing and capitalizing on your unique talents is another kind of ability, I replied. As a result, the company weathered its crisis, and Michael asked his youngest son to take over as CEO. However, his son declined, saying he felt indebted to me and wasn't suited for the role of a CEO. Instead, he planned to identify a suitable successor from the talented individuals he had recruited. leaving Michael busier than ever in the process. Amid this flurry of activity, 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. One day, Sophia called with some exciting news. "Dad, I've officially signed with a talent agency." Sophia had tirelessly pursued her music career while working part-time jobs and supporting her fiancé. Now, she had secured a contract with a major music agency and announced an upcoming tour of live house performances, not yet Budokan, but a big step forward. Her husband, Michael's second son, Ryan, who had lost his sight, had been working hard alongside Sophia to adjust to daily life. "Ryan has perfect pitch," Sophia said with pride. "We're working together as a duo now. I'm the vocalist, and he writes and composes the songs. He's proving that even without sight, there's so much he can do. He's inspiring so many people with hope." With those words, she handed me a single flower. A gerbera, the same kind she had pressed and brought to our home, my office, and to Ryan's bedside. "I think this flower represents the bond in our family. Dad, I'll keep working hand in hand with Ryan from now on. So, please, take care of yourself. Focus on your health, and live a long, happy life with Mom." She said this with a radiant smile, like a flower blooming, during the small wedding ceremony we held with only close friends and family. That day, smiles bloomed everywhere, making it a moment I would cherish for the rest of my life. If you're the CEO, I'll leave and take the employees with me. This company is finished. Tucker declared this as he stood in the CEO's office, holding a stack of envelopes from the desk. So that's how it is. Previously, when Tucker came to negotiate his salary, I had rejected his demands outright, and he left muttering something like, "You'll regret this." It seems he's trying to drag others into his resignation. It's my fault for allowing a rebellious employee like him to emerge. But this is an important matter, so I made sure to confirm with Tucker. "Tucker, just to confirm, you have decided to resign from the company, correct?" Tucker burst out laughing, holding his stomach. "Of course. I've been saying that all along. You won't raise my salary, so there's no choice. These days, talented people know when to abandon a boring company." Hearing this, I looked Tucker in the eye and said, "Thank you. That's a big help. We'll proceed with the necessary steps right away." Tucker, oblivious to what was coming, let out a surprised "What?" and looked at me in confusion. He still doesn't realize that a truth very inconvenient for him is about to come to light. My name is Shane Conway. I'm in my 30s and the CEO of a startup IT company. Being a startup CEO may sound impressive, but this isn't a company I founded myself. I became the CEO by chance, so there's nothing to be proud of. A few years ago, my father started this company. However, he fell ill suddenly and passed away without recovering. He had been working tirelessly, barely sleeping, so it's no surprise he pushed himself too hard. While Dad was leading the company, I was working for a large trading company and living abroad for several years. I knew he'd started a business, but before I could witness his struggles and achievements, he was gone. Dad had once asked me to join him in the company, but that opportunity was lost forever. I wasn't worried about my future. I had saved up a considerable amount due to my frugal lifestyle. When Dad told me about his plans to start a business, I was tempted. However, I was in the middle of a significant project at work and told him I wanted to focus on finishing it before making a decision. Before I could complete that project, I received the news of his passing. I returned home, left my trading company, and took over Dad's business. Given these circumstances, I can't say I'm particularly proud of myself, but I can't keep looking back. Dad always supported me with kind words. Though I now work in a major trading company, I had a rough past. In middle school, I struggled to fit in and ended up attending a charter school. During that time, Dad told me, "Pursue what you love and focus on your strengths. One day, you'll discover what you're good at." That advice encouraged me to dive into computer science, programming, and other areas I found interesting. or useful for the future. Thanks to his encouragement, I developed apps and interacted with people worldwide, even while still in middle school. I want to honor Dad's memory by taking the company public and making it a force for good in society. Fulfilling his dreams would be the ultimate way to repay him. With that vision in mind, I am now managing the company he left behind. After about a year of running the company, I began noticing various issues within it. Operational inefficiencies are relatively easy to fix, but the real challenge lies in people. Moreover, the problem is even deeper rooted because of the behavior of a certain person who serves as the general manager, a position in which he manages his subordinates. The department manager's name was Tucker, but his work attitude was clearly excessive. Reports from other employees indicate that Tucker spends much of his working hours on side gigs. "Mr. Conway, I'm heading out for a bit," Tucker said casually. Perhaps because he's in his 40s and older than me, Tucker has spoken to me informally since I became CEO. Given our operations, there's almost no reason for Tucker to need to visit the post office, so I stopped him. "Thank you for your hard work. May I ask where you're headed?" Tucker gave me an annoyed look and replied, "It's nothing. Sometimes you need to go out for work. I have a personal client to pay today." As he spoke, he picked up a large package and prepared to leave the office. However, our company rarely handles cash or face-to-face transactions. Most of our processes are handled online. Moreover, finance and sales usually manage payments, so this wasn't part of Tucker's job. His explanation didn't make sense to me at all. "We make payments online, don't we? And what's in that package? Are you delivering something to a client?" When I pressed further, Tucker frowned and spoke quickly. "The client isn't tech-savvy and only accepts in-person payments. Besides, getting out of the office once in a while boosts productivity. The package is just my stuff, and I'm putting it in my car. Honestly, it feels like you're micromanaging everyone, and it's stifling." With that, Tucker kicked the office door open roughly and hurriedly left. According to the employees, Tucker's primary side hustle appears to be reselling goods online. While our company doesn't prohibit side jobs, they are allowed only if they don't leak company information or cause any harm. However, this allowance is strictly for activities outside of working hours. As long as he's receiving a salary from our company, he's obligated to focus solely on our business during working hours. If he's dedicating work hours to his reselling activities, then it's a significant issue. After questioning him so thoroughly today, I hope he at least feels some discomfort about continuing such behavior. Still, if I keep receiving similar reports from other employees, a thorough investigation will be necessary. It's disappointing that someone in a managerial position, who should be guiding and mentoring others, is the subject of such suspicions. Resolving to monitor Tucker's actions more closely, I returned to my work. However, just as I tried to focus, messages of concern from employees kept coming in. As part of our company benefits, we stock snacks and coffee for employees, but the budget for these is being depleted at an alarming rate. The frequency of coffee bean purchases has doubled, and snacks are disappearing by the box. On one occasion, a large amount of snacks I replenished with my own money vanished in a single day. Finding this strange, I posted a notice asking employees to be more mindful, but there was no improvement. On top of that, Holly, our finance manager, came to me for advice. "It's about Tucker. His expense claims are blatantly inappropriate. He's submitting bills for private dinners and family meals without hesitation," she said, looking distressed. "Could you do something about it?" she added with a troubled expression. Holly is an incredibly talented individual with certifications as a lawyer and tax accountant. Like me, she had a tough time in middle school and was homeschooled for a while, focusing solely on her studies. Driven by a desire to prove wrong those who looked down on her, she worked incredibly hard, which I deeply admire. On several occasions, I've witnessed Tucker mocking Holly because of her past struggles. Each time, I admonished him, but his response was always off the mark. you shouldn't be too harsh on someone so emotionally fragile. I admire Holly, who is almost the same age as me but has great ability and will, but she continues with a gloomy look on her face. Actually, I once saw him taking office supplies without permission. I subtly warned him, but it seems he's still doing it. Since Tucker is older and often acts condescendingly, Holly probably finds it difficult to confront him directly. As we were discussing this in the break room, Luke walked in to make some coffee. Luke, who's also around my age, is a key contributor to the company with his expertise in marketing and sales, thanks to his experience running his own business in the past. Although his own company failed, he's used those lessons to offer invaluable suggestions to our organization. Having been with the company since my father founded it, Luke knows the company inside out. It's no exaggeration to say that the company functions smoothly, even with me suddenly stepping in as CEO, because of people like Luke. Holly and Luke are incredible assets to the company. Overhearing our conversation, Luke joined in. Holly, I think you should let Shane know about the other issue as well. It's not good to handle this alone, it's a problem for the organization as a whole, he said. Holly hesitated but eventually started speaking, her eyes welling up with tears. Lately, Tucker has been persistently inviting her to dinners that involve drinking. At first, she complied, but his intentions became increasingly obvious and uncomfortable. Tucker has a family, and above all, Holly feels genuinely afraid. Despite her expertise in legal matters, it's hard for her to act decisively when she's directly involved. Holly also loves this company and doesn't want to leave or feel unwelcome here. Knowing how much she cares about the company, I felt even more determined to ensure she didn't endure any further discomfort. Luke seemed to share my sentiments, and in an unusually firm tone, he said, "If this is true, Holly shouldn't have to keep suffering. This is a serious issue, and we need to take immediate action." I nodded in agreement. "We'll prepare to set up an investigative committee. Please keep me informed of anything else that comes up." As we were discussing this, Tucker suddenly appeared in the break room. "How can you guys just stand around chatting in such a small space? I need to make coffee, so move out of the way, will you?" He gestured dismissively at me with his hand, clearly annoyed. Though irritated, I stepped aside to let him pass. From his attitude, it seemed he hadn't overheard our conversation. After making his coffee, Tucker grabbed a handful of snacks from the overflowing snack box and said, later, as he walked out. At that moment, Luke called out to Tucker. "Tucker, are you really eating all those snacks by yourself? If you take that much, no one else will get any. Oh, by the way, I love those snacks." Luke spoke in a light-hearted, playful tone, so Tucker didn't seem offended and even smiled. Luke's ability to communicate without creating tension, combined with his strong work ethic, is a testament to why he excels in sales. "Oh, I didn't know you liked these. Next time, I'll bring some in for you." "Look forward to it," Tucker replied. However, despite his words, Tucker left with a large pile of snacks in hand. Holly watched him leave and let out a sigh. Tucker being generous enough to bring snacks? That'll never happen. Witnessing these dynamics in the office left me feeling heavy-hearted. As the CEO, it's my responsibility to create an environment where employees can work comfortably. With that thought in mind, I left the break room, mentally planning my next steps. The next day, more trouble landed on my plate. As soon as I arrived at the office, Tucker stormed into the CEO's office. "Since you became CEO, my salary hasn't increased at all. Care to explain why that is? Over the past year, I've gotten a clearer view of the company's operations. But one thing is certain, Tucker's performance has been far from exceptional. Not to mention, he's currently facing allegations of inappropriate expense claims, misappropriation of company property, working on side hustles during company hours, and harassment complaints from employees. He seems unaware of all this and clearly lacks the ability to objectively evaluate his own work performance. It's troubling to have an employee who demands a raise while doing so little. Of course, I couldn't say any of this outright, so I carefully chose my words to help him understand. I fully understand the importance of increasing employee satisfaction and retaining talented individuals to grow the company. I'm still assessing things as I settle into this role, but I assure you I'm committed to investing in personnel. Keep up the good work, I'm counting on you. Although I wanted to confront him with the reality, it wasn't the right time. Much still needed to be prepared. However, Tucker didn't like my response and became even more agitated. If talent is so important, you should raise salaries now. Otherwise, people like me, top talent, will leave. It's a competitive job market these days, you know. He was clearly trying to intimidate me, but it only left me feeling disgusted. His threats didn't faze me. I carefully hid my emotions and replied with a smile. I understand your point. However, if the company doesn't remain sustainable, it's all for nothing. We're finally gaining traction. And anyone can see that increasing labor costs significantly right now isn't a wise move. Hearing this, Tucker slammed his hand on my desk and gave me an unsettling grin. Fine, that's your answer, then? Don't come crying to me later. With those words, he turned his back and left the office without so much as a goodbye, slamming the door behind him. Later that evening, I returned from an outing to find a stack of envelopes on my desk. Curious, I picked them up and discovered that each one was labeled resignation letter. There were about 30 envelopes in total. It's unheard of for so many employees to submit their resignations at once. When I looked up, Tucker was standing in the doorway, having entered my office without me noticing. Grinning, he declared, "If you stay on as CEO, I'll take the employees with me. This company is done for." So that's his plan. All those times he muttered, "You'll regret this," he was planning to resign and drag others down with him. It's my responsibility as CEO to prevent such rebellion, but it's still disappointing. Still, I made sure to confirm an important point with Tucker. Tucker, just to confirm, are you saying you're resigning from the company? Tucker burst into laughter, holding his stomach. Of course I am. How many times do I have to say it? You didn't give me a raise, so I have no choice. Talented people won't stick around in a boring company anymore. Hearing this, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Thank you. That's very helpful. I'll start processing the paperwork immediately." Tucker, clueless about what I was implying, looked at me with a baffled expression and blurted out, "What?" He still doesn't know that the truth, which is far from convenient for him, is about to come to light. What's the meaning of this? Don't try to bluff me. Even Luke and Holly, the core members of this company, are leaving. I knew this wasn't true, but I chose not to deny it outright. Instead, I began to reveal the facts to Tucker, one step at a time. I understand your intention to resign, Tucker, but we'll be contacting you a few times going forward, so please ensure you're available. Other than your accumulated funds, there's likely nothing else we owe you. I wanted to inform you in advance so you can plan for the future. Tucker's eyes widened at my words. Hey, what nonsense are you spouting? Are you saying I won't get any compensation or bonus? I've been working diligently. What have I done to deserve this? As Tucker stepped forward aggressively, Luke and Holly entered the office. Holly spoke first. Are you not aware of your actions? Your offenses have been largely proven, and you will have to face the consequences. Tucker looked between Luke and Holly with a trembling voice. Wait, what's going on here? Aren't you two leaving with me? You promised to quit this company and work for the one I'm starting, didn't you? Holly and Luke looked at each other at Tucker's words. Luke then said in disgust, "Who said we were coming with you? I might have said it sounds interesting, but I never agreed to anything. And starting a company isn't as easy as you think. Someone who can't even earn the trust of their colleagues isn't likely to succeed. And there's no way we're getting on a sinking ship we can already see is doomed. While Tucker's words seem to have come from an idea that does not seem to have accumulated management knowledge, the words of Luke, who has started a business once and experienced failure, carry a different weight. Because Luke knows the joys and fears of starting a business, he must intuitively understand that Tucker will not be able to make it work. Luke continued, "By the way, in the company you plan to start, would you turn a blind eye if your employees worked on side hustles? If so, maybe I'll take a job at your company while still working here. Oh, and for the record, I've already reported to Shane that you've been reselling goods during work hours." Tucker visibly panicked at Luke's remark. "What? How do you? No, you must be mistaken. I've never done any side hustles." Desperate to deny it, Tucker tried to deflect, but Luke pressed on relentlessly. "Then why do you, someone with no need to leave the office, frequently go out during work hours? You claimed it was for a transaction with someone unfamiliar with the internet, but there's no record of such transactions anywhere in our systems. Out of curiosity, I once followed you to see for myself." Hearing this, Tucker snapped and retorted defiantly, "You spied on me? That's a dirty trick. Anyway, the blame lies with a boss who underpays me. I have a family to support. I had no choice." Tucker's claims were baseless. He was being paid above the industry average. If he couldn't manage his finances, it was either due to poor budgeting or outright dishonesty. Before Tucker could continue his excuses, Holly stepped in. "So that's why you've been submitting inappropriate expense claims? We've verified that you filed expenses for family dinners and personal purchases. Every one of those receipts has been traced." As Holly spoke, Tucker's face turned pale, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. His reaction only confirmed the truth of her accusations. Holly pressed further. "By the way, do you recognize that old printer over there? It's one I purchased on a resale app." Tucker turned to look at the printer Holly was pointing at, his eyes widening in shock. He murmured, "No way." Under his breath, "You've been taking company property and selling it online, haven't you? The model numbers match. And some still have the company's inventory stickers attached. Recently, your sales must have spiked, right? That's because I've been buying them back." As Tucker's knees began to shake, Holly approached him, her voice chillingly cold. "Under the charge of embezzlement, you could face up to 10 years in prison. Additionally, your repeated mockery of me for my school history constitutes defamation. I could seek monetary damages for that." Ignoring Tucker's pleas for forgiveness, Holly continued, her gaze icy. "And let's not forget how you forced me to go to a bar despite my refusals. I won't ever forget that. Your actions could be classified as coercive sexual misconduct, which carries a potential prison sentence of 6 months to 10 years. Be prepared for the consequences." Tucker collapsed to his knees, defeated. Looking up at me, he spoke in a faint voice. "So, they're not resigning, are they? And I guess none of the others will follow me either." Feeling both pity and contempt, I responded honestly. "It's not like I immediately thought the resignation letters were fake. But when I saw that all the handwriting matched, it raised suspicions. When I first saw the resignation letters, I thought perhaps I had driven my employees to the brink. But after noticing that the handwriting on all the envelopes was identical, I began to suspect they were forged." Tucker's sudden announcement that he was taking employees with him only solidified my doubts. "In any case, you can't stay here any longer. Pack up your things and leave by the end of the day. We'll be in touch about the next steps. Thank you for your time here." Tucker quietly left the office. Further investigations revealed even more misconduct on Tucker's part. The most serious issue was the breach of customer data. It came to light that he had sold sensitive company information to third parties for substantial sums of money. The sheer amount of wrongdoings we uncovered required thorough review and legal action. Ironically, the reselling side hustle he was so proud of turned out to be a failure. Once Holly, his main buyer, stopped purchasing from him, it seemed his sales completely dried up. Once all of Tucker's offenses are confirmed, he will undoubtedly face consequences far greater than the small profits he made. I heard that he had to sell his newly built house and now lives alone in a small apartment. Perhaps even his family has abandoned him. I don't know what lies ahead for him, but I can only hope that he takes responsibility for his actions and moves forward with a sense of repentance. As for me, I've already begun working on expanding our business alongside my talented team. Going public is just the beginning. I also aim to expand internationally in the future. If everything goes well, the company's performance will grow exponentially. Dad's dream is within reach. Sometimes, I feel anxious about whether everything will truly work out, but in those moments, I picture Dad's face and shake off the doubt. I'm determined to succeed. As I looked up at the sky, I felt as though Dad was smiling and nodding in approval. "You and your son both look incompetent fools," said Greg, the man who had just thrown coffee on my son Marcus while laughing mockingly. I was left speechless at the unbelievable scene unfolding before me. Who exactly is this man? I didn't want to believe he worked at Marcus's company, so I demanded, "Which branch are you from?" "Call the branch manager immediately." "What?" As he stood there, unable to comprehend the situation, I revealed my position. The moment Greg realized I was the chairman of a group of 20 companies, his demeanor did a complete 180. But it was already too late for that. Greg, now pale and stammering in his attempts to explain himself, was already facing a sealed fate. Soon after, one revelation after another about Greg's misdeeds came to light. The man who had strutted around so arrogantly found himself plummeting into his own personal hell. My name is Simon Owens. I'm a 58-year-old man. I serve as the chairman of the company. It's a well-known stationery sales company with over 20 group subsidiaries. In truth, I was the president of the company just a few years ago. But I stepped down because someone more capable than me was ready to take on the role. If I'm being honest, I did wish I could have stayed in the position a little longer. But as a leader, there are responsibilities that can't be ignored. There was someone more suitable for the role, and my wife, Sarah, and my son, Marcus, had often told me, "You're working too much," so I stepped down from the position of president. As chairman, I focus on advising and supporting the company presidents. However, it doesn't always seem that way to others. Even if you're taking it easy, you're still working quite a bit, aren't you? You've worked so much already. You could just fully retire and leave everything to the president, Mr. Kennedy, but you keep working. Dad, you really do love working, don't you? Sarah and son often tease me like this, but I'm grateful for how much they care about me. My son Marcus seems to have inherited this work ethic. At 38, he works tirelessly at his branch office every day. I worry that Marcus might be overworking himself, but since he lives in the countryside, I can't just visit him easily. That's because I work in the city where our headquarters is located. However, I'll soon have the chance to visit his branch in my capacity as chairman, so I'm looking forward to seeing him. I wonder how Marcus has been doing at work lately. It was early May, when the fresh greenery was at its most vibrant. I had returned to my rural hometown for the first time in a while. My parents, now in their 80s, are surprisingly energetic despite their age. "Simon, it's been a while. Don't overwork yourself too much, you hear?" "That's right. If you do, Marcus will start copying you." I worry about him pushing himself too hard, even if he's got the stamina. Despite their words, they seem to be living fulfilling days, going for walks with neighbors and playing gateball. It seems that our family has a knack for producing people with a lot of stamina. The reason I came back to my hometown was to visit a nearby branch for an inspection. But since I was in the area, I decided to drop by and see my parents, too. The inspection is scheduled for tomorrow, so today I plan to stay at my parents' house and tomorrow at Marcus's. After catching up with my parents about recent events, I spent a leisurely day at their house before heading to visit my son's home, which is located near my parents' place and was built just a few years ago. Unlike me, who enjoys working in the hustle and bustle of the city, my son seems to prefer living surrounded by nature. After becoming a working adult, Marcus built a house in our hometown and commutes to work from there. I'm pretty sure today's his day off, so he should be home. But just to be safe, I'll give him a call. Even though it's my son's house, I can't just walk in unannounced. Leaving my parents' house, I walked the short distance of about 10 minutes, muttering to myself along the way. Taking out my phone, I tried calling both his home and his cell, but he didn't answer. Maybe he was busy with something. When I arrived at his house, I saw Marcus getting into a car parked in front of the entrance. I called out to him in a loud voice. "Marcus, how've you been?" "Dad? What are you doing here?" Marcus stared at me in surprise, his face filled with confusion. I had told him a few days ago about the branch inspection and that I'd be coming back to the hometown, but it seemed he had completely forgotten. "Didn't I tell you? I mentioned I'd be coming back today." As we talked, it seemed Marcus finally remembered. "Oh, right. Was that today?" Sorry, I've got plans now." He checked his watch with a slightly awkward expression. It was supposed to be his day off, but Marcus was dressed in a suit. Perhaps some urgent work had come up. Well, it can't be helped. I'll just wander around the area for a bit. Yeah, I should be back by evening. Sorry again. I wondered what he was heading off to do, but I decided not to pry and simply watched him leave. Marcus got into his car and quickly disappeared from my sight. His complexion looked a bit off. Was he really okay? Later, after wandering around the local area aimlessly, I headed back to Marcus's house, timing my visit to match his expected return. When he finally came home, he looked utterly exhausted. After being let into his house, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about his daily life as I took in the state of the room. Items were scattered everywhere, and there were piles of trash lying around. "It seems like you haven't been cleaning much. There's dust piling up on the shelves, and your desk is covered with stationery. Have you been too busy with work?" Seeing the pens and other supplies from our company carelessly tossed around filled me with a strange unease. Perhaps it was because I saw parallels between the products I nurtured and the son I had raised. Lost in thought, I barely noticed when Marcus changed into casual clothes. He'd traded his suit for an apron and was now making a simple stir-fry. However, his movements were sluggish, clearly affected by fatigue. "It's just been a bit hectic, but I'm fine. Anyway, I'm hungry, so I'll make dinner. You don't have to go out of your way. Wouldn't it be better to rest if you're this tired?" I voiced my concern, but Marcus didn't stop cooking. "It's fine, really. Besides, I've already started cooking, so if you don't stay for dinner, it'll go to waste." "All right, if you insist." Reluctantly, I agreed and began tidying up the scattered items on the living room table. A few minutes later, I sat with Marcus, eating the freshly prepared stir-fry and rice while watching TV. How many years had it been since I last shared a meal with him? Even though we only exchanged casual conversation, I felt a deep joy reconnecting with my son after so long. Afterwards, I watched Marcus clear the table and do the dishes while I idly stared at the television. The news was covering an issue about harassment by superiors in the workplace. On the screen, a male expert with a serious expression was expressing concern for employees in vulnerable positions. When bosses make unreasonable demands, it can be incredibly hard for regular employees. Using power to harass subordinates is unacceptable. Ideally, employees should feel comfortable raising an SOS, but the more serious ones tend to internalize their struggles. As the words echoed from the TV, my eyes wandered to the untidy room and then to Marcus's back. I couldn't help but wonder, was my son truly okay? Glancing at the corner of the room, my eyes fell on a calendar, crammed with handwritten schedules. The next morning, dressed in a suit, I headed to the branch office. As chairman, I had a scheduled inspection today, something I had explained to Marcus in advance. Since it was a weekday, I had hoped to head to the office with him in the morning, but it seemed he was busy. Filled with anticipation, I woke up early, left my parents' house, and headed to Marcus's home, only to find that my son had already rushed out at the unusually early hour of 4 a.m. "You have a spare key, right? Feel free to relax here while you wait, but don't forget to lock up when you leave." I recalled his pale complexion as he walked out the door. It seemed like he hadn't recovered from his exhaustion. Was the work at the branch really this demanding? I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, but I knew I'd get answers once I saw things for myself. Carrying this lingering concern, I left Marcus's house a few hours later and headed toward the branch. When I arrived, I met with other employees outside the building and went over the day's agenda. With them, I entered the 10-story branch office, ready to begin the inspection. However, I hadn't expected Mr. Kennedy from headquarters, along with his secretary, to join us. Originally, our schedules weren't supposed to align, but my secretary is excellent and managed to make it work so I could join you for the tour. Though it was quite a hassle yesterday because of that. "Mr. Kennedy, could you please stop throwing unexpected tasks at me?" Sorry about that." Mr. Kennedy, in his 40s and about a decade younger than me, is the kind of person who efficiently gives directions over his phone even during brief breaks. He's probably always thinking about the company, working tirelessly and with great dedication. I couldn't help but feel proud of him as my successor. His secretary, a young woman likely in her 20s, voiced complaints, but it didn't seem entirely genuine. It appeared that the two had a solid foundation of trust between them. As the tour began, I spoke to the secretary. I had planned to conduct this inspection quietly, but with this many people joining, we'll need to make sure we don't disrupt the employees at work. Moving around in a large group could unintentionally interfere with their work or cause unforeseen issues. We would need to be extra cautious. With that in mind, we walked through the branch office together. The branch manager was supposed to greet us, but he didn't show up, so we ended up touring the office on our own. The atmosphere inside the branch felt somewhat stifling, and everyone seemed extremely busy. What caught my attention amidst the activity were the numerous notices posted around the office. Messages like "outperform other companies, even by a little, or set higher goals than others" were all aimed at fueling competitiveness. At first glance, the notices seemed like a good idea, but the employees didn't appear to view them favorably. Some looked at them with annoyance, while others glared at them with resentment. Observing this, we decided to move from the first floor of the branch to the second floor. When I stood in front of the elevator, there was a sign that read "out of order." Since there was no other choice, we decided to use the stairs to check each floor. For us, a group of older individuals, climbing stairs was quite exhausting. "May I take a short break? I injured my foot recently." To make matters worse, one person was moving slowly due to an injury. I couldn't let him move alone, so I decided to accompany him. We asked the others to go ahead while I supported him and climbed the stairs slowly, eventually reaching the second floor. Seeing that he was out of breath, I helped him to a bench nearby. I noticed a vending machine close by and bought 2 cans of coffee. I thought it might ease his mind if we didn't just sit there doing nothing. "I'm so sorry for causing trouble like this." "Don't worry about it. I'm getting older myself, and climbing stairs isn't exactly easy for me either." As we drank coffee and chatted to keep him from feeling overly apologetic, 2 employees walked past us. "You're absolutely useless. There's no one more incompetent than you. You're already worthless, so you should be working twice as hard as anyone else. Forget about taking the next day off." One of them, a man in his 50s, was shouting angrily at the other. The other person was my son, Marcus. Marcus apologized with an apologetic expression, saying, "I'm sorry." Wondering what had happened, I called out to Marcus. "Marcus, what's going on?" Noticing me, Marcus looked surprised and exclaimed, "Dad. Don't worry, it's just a small mistake at work. I'm fine." Even so, no parent can help but worry about their child. The man resting nearby glanced over at us with an awkward expression and spoke up. "Should I step away? I've rested enough, and my foot is fine now." "You must be worried about your son. Are you really okay?" "I'm sorry, but please don't push yourself too hard." Understanding the situation, he thoughtfully left the area, looking back with concern. Though I was still a bit worried about him, my attention quickly returned to Marcus. Just as I was about to ask for more details, a man nearby let out a disgruntled remark. "Who the hell is this guy?" "That's my father, Simon. And Dad, this is." Before Marcus could finish introducing the man, his words were cut off. "Hi, I'm Greg." He introduced himself with an air of arrogance. "So this old man is your father? I can see the resemblance." Greg sneered as he approached, reaching out toward me. He snatched the coffee from my hand and poured it over my son's head. "You and your son both look incompetent fools." The sudden act of violence left my mind blank. It was an unbelievable sight. While my anger as a father burned inside me, as the chairman, I knew I couldn't ignore what had just happened. So, I spoke to Greg directly. "Which branch are you from?" "Call the branch manager immediately." "What?" The reason I asked was simple. I couldn't bear the thought of someone like him working for our company. I hoped he was just a temporary worker from another branch. "Tell me the name of the branch where you work and the name of your branch manager." Acting all high and mighty, "What the hell are you even talking about?" He stared at me blankly, clearly not understanding the situation. It seemed he hadn't realized who I was. I cleared my throat and revealed my identity. "I am the chairman of this company. With a group of 20 companies under us, I don't expect you to recognize every executive's face. I won't fault you for not knowing me. But I cannot overlook harassment against our employees. So, will you tell me your branch manager's name?" I don't particularly like emphasizing my position. But in this case, there was no other choice. I couldn't let Greg's actions slide. When I explained this, his face turned pale. I had no idea you were Mr. Owens. Please forgive my rudeness." He bowed deeply, his voice trembling. Greg pulled out a handkerchief, perhaps intending to clean up Marcus, but I stopped him with a gesture. "Marcus, I'm sorry about the coffee. Are you all right?" At this point, Greg's attempts to show concern were meaningless. I didn't want him touching my son. "Please don't lay a hand on Marcus." I asked Marcus if there was a shower room nearby. When he nodded, I escorted him away to get cleaned up, leaving Greg behind. "Make sure to dry your hair thoroughly so you don't catch a cold." "I know, Dad. Do you have any idea how old I am?" Marcus chuckled wryly as he walked away. Greg, left behind, wore an uncomfortable expression. "Now, about my earlier question?" Well. I fixed him with a stern expression. Greg mumbled, his mouth moving wordlessly, but no coherent response came. "Greg, if you don't want to talk about yourself right now, that's fine. But in that case, I'd like to speak with the person in charge of this branch." "Where are they?" They were nowhere to be seen when we arrived. When I introduced myself at the reception desk earlier, I was told the branch manager was too busy to meet us. I assumed they were out handling urgent matters, but it seemed that wasn't the case. "Do they have some unmissable business elsewhere?" Greg hesitated, his eyes darting around before whispering in a barely audible voice. "That would be me." "What? What did you just say?" "I am the branch manager of this office." Hearing those words, I was so shocked that I couldn't find the right words to respond. A branch manager behaving this way, spewing such insults and pouring coffee on an employee's head? What on earth was going on with the working conditions at this branch? I suddenly felt a wave of anxiety. Greg, standing before me, hastily began making excuses. I heard the elevator was broken and thought it would be unacceptable to inconvenience Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Owens. I was confirming the situation with the maintenance staff when I happened to see Marcus and asked him about his progress. That's when things escalated. Given that one of our group members had a leg injury, addressing the elevator issue wasn't entirely wrong. But he had failed to manage his responsibilities while we were inspecting the first floor. As a branch manager, his competence was now in question. Not contacting us at all was already a significant mark against him. I don't want to be overly harsh about a single mistake, but this level of neglect from a branch manager warrants criticism. I apologize. I should have come to address Chairman Owens immediately. However, this was not the only issue I needed to raise. His leadership skills were also highly questionable. I recalled the earlier scene with Marcus. Thankfully, the coffee wasn't too hot, but if it had been, Marcus could have been severely burned. Have you always treated employees this way? Such behavior is utterly unacceptable for someone in a leadership position. Greg trembled as he bowed his head. You're absolutely right. I deeply regret my actions and sincerely apologize. He loudly apologized to me, but I couldn't bring myself to trust his words. For now, I want you to focus on assisting Mr. Kennedy and the others. Don't worry about me. Yes, sir. After I gave my instructions, I watched as Greg hurriedly left the scene, clearly nervous. I then headed to find Marcus. In the branch's shower room, Marcus had cleaned himself up and was now wearing one of the spare suits provided by the office. I borrowed a meeting room and spent several minutes speaking with him. During this conversation, I approached Marcus not as his father but as the chairman of the company. Marcus, as chairman, I need to ask, what kind of harassment have you endured? There's no need to protect the branch manager. Sitting in a chair, Marcus looked down. Well. Marcus seemed hesitant to speak, his words faltering. Was he being threatened by Greg? Even if you've been silenced, I need you to have the courage to speak up for the sake of the company. When I said that, Marcus looked at me with an apologetic expression. It's not that. I just didn't want to make you worry, Dad. It seemed he had kept quiet out of concern for me. Perhaps this was the consequence of me prioritizing work and putting Marcus on the back burner. Marcus might not blame me for it, but that only made the guilt weigh heavier on me. Thinking back, even his behavior the day before had seemed strange. Maybe I should have pressed him further at that time. This is for the other employees, too. Please, can you tell me what happened? I placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder and looked at him seriously. Finally, Marcus gave in, letting out a sigh of resignation before speaking. Greg has been forcing us to work long hours. Marcus then began to recount the various wrongdoings Greg had committed. It seemed Greg had imposed extremely unreasonable working conditions on the branch employees, routinely requiring them to work on their days off. Overtime was considered normal, and some employees even worked past midnight. In extreme cases, they couldn't go home and ended up sleeping at the office. Apparently, Marcus himself had stayed overnight at the office several times. They even told us, "You should be grateful for the rewarding work," and didn't pay us for our overtime. That's a serious issue. Yes. On top of that, Greg would show up during our shifts, watching us closely and making comments, which caused many employees to develop severe stress and even breakdowns. The reason Marcus had been so busy on his day off recently was that he had been forced to work. Realizing this, I decided that Greg could no longer remain in his position. Once this inspection was over, I would need to speak with the HR department. For the time being, I discussed the situation when I met with President Kennedy and the executives on the top floor. They were outraged upon learning about the terrible conditions at the branch. I can't believe something like this has been happening in one of our branches. This is unacceptable. Should we adjust our plans, Mr. Kennedy? Yes, we'll need to discuss this with HR. A grim fate awaited Greg, who had been guiding Mr. Kennedy and the executives around, but I felt no sympathy for him. He brought this upon himself. Greg would face an appropriate investigation and the consequences he deserved. However, before addressing that, there was someone else I needed to reprimand. After returning to Marcus's house together, I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" Then, Marcus looked at me with an apologetic expression and said, "Sorry, Dad. Even though you stepped down as president, you love working hard, don't you? I didn't want to trouble you. Besides, I thought I'd be fine since I'm still young and have the energy. Marcus is much more physically robust and healthier than I am. Perhaps he thought it wouldn't be a problem to push himself to some extent. However, even if you think you're fine, fatigue inevitably builds up. You've been looking pale both yesterday and today. If you push yourself too hard, it might be too late by the time your body gives out. It's important to rest before you feel overwhelmed. Don't forget that." "Yeah, okay, Dad." After I firmly spoke to him, Marcus reflected on his actions and began preparing dinner with a dejected demeanor. However, given everything that had happened during the day, I decided to cook instead. Hearing about the situation, my parents brought over a large amount of prepared dishes, which was a great help. That evening, we had dinner together at Marcus's house, the first time in a long while that we were all together. Dad, Grandma, and Grandpa brought coffee, too. "Do you want some?" "Sure, I'll have some. But I'll make it myself." "You just sit there and eat your meal." The atmosphere in the living room was still somewhat subdued after the day's events, but a news report on TV lightened the mood slightly. It covered a story about employees at another company who had suffered harassment from their boss but had found the courage to stand up against it. Hoping their situation would improve, I felt my resolve strengthen. I decided to do everything in my power to improve the working conditions at this branch. I stayed in the area for another 2 days before returning home. Since it coincided with a holiday, I planned to use the time to relax a little. During that time, I even came up with an idea for a new product, reminding me how important rest truly is. However, an unpleasant incident occurred during my stay. For 2 consecutive days, Greg had been loitering around Marcus's house. Despite being explicitly warned by Mr. Kennedy and me to stay away from Marcus, he came to see him in an attempt to protect himself. Apparently, he had been trying to silence other employees to prevent them from revealing more about his actions. "Please, Marcus. Don't say anything more. I don't want Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Owens to get the wrong idea." Greg, who had come to Marcus's house, said this while bowing his head. Since I was staying at the house, I immediately understood what was happening and scolded him sharply. It seems our warnings fell on deaf ears. "If you continue acting as you please, shall I call the police?" "Mr. Owens. I had no idea you were still here. I'm terribly sorry." Realizing he had crossed the line, Greg stopped coming to Marcus's house, but caution was still necessary. I told Marcus to call me immediately if anything happened. As expected, Greg's dismissal was soon finalized. It seemed he had lost the will to show up at the branch and remained holed up at home, leaving the handover of responsibilities incomplete, which caused some disruption at the branch. Although the employees had to deal with the aftermath, the atmosphere seemed brighter, likely because they were relieved by Greg's departure. Sometime later, Greg reportedly returned to the branch, looking displeased as he gathered his personal belongings. If I hadn't poured coffee on Marcus that day, I could have stayed as branch manager. He reportedly muttered these words, but I couldn't agree with his sentiment. Greg lacked the ability to lead a branch. Even if I hadn't been present that day, it was only a matter of time before he would have been demoted or dismissed as his misconduct came to light. Simply dismissing him wasn't enough, so a detailed investigation into Greg's actions was conducted. It was revealed that his excessive demands on subordinates stemmed from his vanity. "Don't let those rival companies beat us. Don't make me look bad. If you fail, I'll be the one laughed at. He had often said things like this to his employees. Apparently, he had been ridiculed by another group's branch manager for poor performance, which drove him to try and forcibly improve his branch's results. The competitive notices I had seen plastered around the office were likely a result of this pressure. After his dismissal, Greg quickly sought a new job. Thanks to connections within his family, he managed to find another position swiftly. But he couldn't shake off his arrogant behavior as a former branch manager. Recognized as an overbearing newcomer at his new workplace, he was disliked by other employees and quit within a month. I saw him in town the other day. He looked gaunt and was walking with a defeated expression. Marcus said this during one of our phone conversations. On the other hand, it seems that without Greg, the branch employees are now thriving. Marcus mentioned that he has been able to properly rest on his days off. Getting a good night's sleep has cleared my head. I hadn't felt this refreshed in ages. I've realized how important proper breaks are. You were right, Dad. Knowing that he is working healthily every day is a great relief. The employees who had been stifled under Greg's management are now performing better than ever, and the branch's sales figures have improved. I'm glad the workplace has become an environment where they can work without hesitation. Going forward, I must ensure that no second Greg emerges by closely monitoring the education of those in leadership positions. As chairman, I will continue to do what I can while keeping a watchful eye to ensure employees like Marcus aren't pushing themselves too hard.